Chapter 789. With a slight thought, Luo Fan raised his hand and grabbed the spirit guide from within the profound light. The fastest novel update on the internet. This spirit guide was extremely mysterious, and its power was extremely astonishing. Just as it left the profound light, the mysterious channel connected to the spirit guide transmitted an endless power that gathered the spirit guide and produced an earth-shattering pulling force. It wanted to pull the spirit guide to an unknown place far away, a place that seemed to belong to another space-time continuum. Luo Fan had already anticipated this. Although the pulling force was unimaginably strong, his power immediately enveloped the spirit guide the moment it disappeared, cutting off all connections between the spirit guide and the outside world. Even if the mysterious channel was indestructible, it could only barely maintain a connection. The power that came from an unknown place could no longer enter the spirit guide, and it was even more unable to continue pulling the spirit guide to its location. Luo Fan raised his hand and gently pinched it, and the spirit guide fell into his hand. This spirit guide was an existence that was countless times smaller than dust. Its body did not have any physical form, but was only a strange pattern formed by the condensation and transformation of all kinds of mysterious energy. Once it fell into the hands of a living being, unless one already knew of its existence, it would be absolutely difficult to discover that it was already in the hands of a living being. And if one's perception was not sharp to the extreme, it would be completely impossible to sense the feeling of the spirit guide in his hand. Luo Fan naturally already knew about it, and his perception was sharp to the extreme. Therefore, he could easily see and feel the existence of the spirit guide. At this moment, the spirit guide was in his hand and was being wrapped by his power. It was constantly throbbing at an extremely mysterious frequency, constantly struggling as if it was some kind of living being. Regarding the spirit guide, although Luo Fan had heard of its various characteristics from the revered ones, this was the first time he had seen it. Therefore, he was quite interested in this spirit guide. At this moment, the power within his body was circulating as if it was boiling. His eyes flashed with a brilliance that could see through everything. It was tightly locked onto the spirit guide at the tip of his finger. Although the spirit guidance realm was several times smaller than a speck of dust, it was suddenly magnified in his eyes under this kind of circumstances. That tiny speck of dust became as vast as a part of heaven and earth, and every line within it seemed to have become as vast as a world. Every bit of power became incomparably huge and obvious. Under such circumstances, Luo Fan only needed a glance to clearly see the entire structure of the spirit guide. The spirit guide was a mysterious object bestowed upon all magical treasures by the great heaven primal world. It was born according to the nature of the magical treasure, and its complexity was incomparable to that of an ordinary cultivator's. Although it had been magnified from a size that was countless times smaller than a speck of dust to its current size that seemed to fill the entire world. However, there were still countless densely packed lines within the spirit guide, and there were almost no gaps to be found. Almost every place was filled with those winding and twisting lines. Although every single line was countless times larger than before, it was still only the size of an arm. In order to fill the entire world with spiritual energy, the length of the line would be at least hundreds of millions of miles. With such a complex structure, even Luo Fan could see it clearly at a glance. However, he was unable to distinguish it in an instant. Moreover, he could not analyze the spirit guide to completely understand the specific appearance and level of the magical treasure corresponding to the spirit guide. What kind of function did it have? He could only roughly sense that the magical treasure corresponding to the spirit guide was at least a level 7 magical treasure. In other words, in the untainted world, it was at least an existence of the great heavenly treasure level. If that was really the case, it could be said that in this life, apart from the infinite void palace that Luo Fan had refined, this was the second great heavenly treasure that he had encountered. From this, one could see how precious and powerful this magical treasure was. Even if Luo Fan's Tao heart was firm and he had almost no desire for external objects and only wished to raise his own cultivation realm, he could not help but be moved by this magical treasure. His heart moved slightly. Luo Fan had already made a decision. He poured a wave of power into the spirit guide. At the same time, he slightly released the seal on the spirit guide, allowing the magical treasure that was connected to the spirit guide through a mysterious channel to suddenly absorb his power. In an instant, it traveled through time and space, arriving at another time and space. At Luo Fan's current realm, all of his power had already been deeply imprinted by him. It had become an inseparable whole with him. Under this kind of situation, even if his power was transferred to another time and space, as long as it was not completely digested, he would still be able to faintly sense it and know exactly where the power went. And the reason why the spirit guide was able to draw his power was because this power was not the power that he normally used. Instead, he specially changed the nature of the power according to the spirit guide's ability to attract a certain existence in the mysterious light, causing it to imitate a certain kind of power that was attracted by the mysterious light. After the power was transmitted, he once again sealed the spirit guide, shielding the connection between the spirit guide and the magical treasure to the point where it was faintly discernible, almost to the point where it was cut off. After that, he casually put away the spirit guide and put it into his own heaven and earth in the sleeve. After doing all this, he quietly sensed the power that had already been drawn to another time and space. He felt its state, and through the changes in its state, he deduced the treatment that it was currently experiencing. The moment the power was transmitted to that time and space, it seemed to have suffered an indescribable pressure and was worn down by more than half. Then, when it was worn down to its core, the power seemed to have resisted that kind of wearing down power. Although it was still under an indescribable pressure and was being worn down in various ways, it was no longer reduced, as if it could no longer be damaged. Feeling this, Luo Fan breathed a sigh of relief, and a faint smile appeared on his face. It seems that the magical treasure should only be a 7th-tier magical treasure, not an 8th-tier or 9th-tier magical treasure. That power was the power of a peak, disbanded celestial of the great, all-embracing heaven. Although it had been changed, its quality had not increased, nor had it weakened. If the magical treasure had surpassed the 7th tier, it would certainly have been able to completely wear down that power in an instant and completely devour it. At this time, it had only worn down half, and devoured half of it couldn't continue, which meant that the magical treasure was at most in the same realm as his cultivation, which was the 7th tier. The value of a 7th tier magical treasure was naturally far less than that of an 8th tier or 9th tier magical treasure, but a 7th tier magical treasure was barely at the level that Luo Fan could covet. If the level of that magical treasure reached the 8th tier or 9th tier, although its value would greatly increase, it would have already exceeded the limit that Luo Fan could covet at this time, unless he could restore the magical power that his body possessed. Otherwise, he could only stay far away from that magical treasure. It was precisely because of this that Luo Fan revealed such a smile at this time. Since that magical treasure just happened to be something that he could covet, Luo Fan naturally wouldn't be polite. He secretly calculated, and he already knew where his power was being drawn by the magic treasure. That was also where the magical treasure had gone. Although it was in another time and space, its entrance was not in any other place, but in the primordial ruins. Moreover, looking at the approximate location, it seemed to be where the Bloodwood King and the others were at. It seems that this move can't be avoided. I didn't expect to contact them in this way. Luo Fan bitterly smiled. He was too lazy to continue to the upper levels of the tower. He directly took out the magical treasures that he had collected before and casually patted the mysterious light. The mysterious light formed by the immortal devouring beast was divided into 9 parts, and with a point of his finger, he sent them into the 9 magical treasures. The 9 magical treasures were all 4th tier and 5th tier magical treasures, and because they were refined in the eternal forest, which was the most suitable place for magical treasures to develop intelligence, they had treasure spirits. Whether it was the treasure spirits or the magical treasures, they hadn't reached the level that they should have. At this time, Luo Fan sent these mysterious lights in to refine these magical treasures, eliminating the drawbacks caused by the improper refining of these magical treasures. The reason why he did this, it wasn't that Luo Fan valued these magical treasures very much. It was just that these magical treasures had fallen into his hands and were already his magical treasures, so he felt it was a pity that he couldn't use all of their potential. Anyway, it wasn't difficult for him to eliminate these drawbacks. The mysterious light was formed by the power, body, soul, evil spirit, and everything else of the immortal devouring beast. The immortal devouring beast was an existence of the 7th-tier immortal realm, which was an existence of the same level as Luo Fan. The power of this existence was more than 1,000,000 times stronger than a 4th-tier or 5th-tier magical treasure. Even if Luo Fan had divided the mysterious light into 9 parts, the power contained in each part was more than 10,000 times greater than any magical treasure. When this power was sent into the magical treasures treasure spirits instantly let out earth-shattering screams. Even if their intelligence was extremely incomplete, it was still intelligence after all. After all, they also knew pain, so they would naturally scream. Furthermore, the imprints that their original owners had left in these magic treasures, which were completely integrated with every single detail of the magic treasures, were instantly torn apart by the impact of the violent power, instantly disappearing into nothingness. The moment the imprints in the magical treasures were erased, the Bloodwood Monarch and the others who were guarding a door in a world level thousands of miles away from where Luo Fan was heading felt their hearts tremble. In an instant, their faces became pale. It felt like they had lost a part of their bodies. They were the ones who had refined the magical treasures that Luo Fan had seized, and the imprints inside those magical treasures were theirs. At this moment, the imprints on those magical treasures had been erased by Luo Fan with the mysterious light, so their minds were naturally damaged. Fortunately, they were all at the rank 6 celestial realm, and their minds were tough. Erasing the imprints left in the rank 4 and rank 5 magical treasures did not cause much damage to them. As a result, their faces only paled and their minds trembled. If those magical treasures were of the same rank, or even higher rank than them, then they would not have been able to stop their minds from trembling. At the very least, they would have coughed up blood. Even if they had been seriously injured and lost all their combat power, it would not have been impossible. Although they were wary of each other, the moment this feeling appeared, they could not help but look at each other. They all understood what had happened, and their expressions changed greatly. I didn't expect that rank 7 existence to be interested in rank 4 and rank 5 magical treasures. If he finds this place, things will become troublesome. Similar thoughts flashed through their minds. As these thoughts flashed through their minds, they all felt a sense of urgency. They wanted to quickly deal with their opponents and seize the items they were fighting for as soon as possible. Luo Fan naturally did not know what kind of changes in their minds would occur when he reforged the magical treasures, but he knew that he could not hide it from them. However, he clearly did not care about what they thought, not to mention that they could not find him. Even if they did, they would only bring him some trouble. There was no need for him to care. At this moment, his mind was divided into 9 parts, wrapping around the 9 magical treasures. The power of these 9 magical treasures was tens of thousands of times weaker than the power contained in the mysterious light. In an instant, the power contained in the mysterious light broke through their originally extremely stable structure. The 9 magical treasures instantly turned into 9 balls of light that flickered with different colors. Within the brilliance, there were all kinds of wonderful lines, symbols, patterns, words, and other mysterious carriers of the great Tao. They rose and fell, recombined, and intertwined. The moment the stable structure of the magical treasures was broken, the treasure spirits stopped screaming and fell into a daze. Their originally weak intelligence instantly fell into the deepest sleep. Although there were various methods to refine these magical treasures, There was nothing special about them. However, there was nothing special about them. They were all refined using the widely circulated tool, refinement methods, of the great heaven primordial world. Luo Fan had venerable human explain everything he knew about the great heaven primordial world, which naturally included all kinds of tool refinement methods. Thus, the refining methods of these magical treasures were no secret to Luo Fan. With just a thought, he knew how each magical treasure was refined, what materials were used, and how much time had passed for them to become magical treasures. He also knew how much time had passed for them to reach their current level. He also knew what had caused their power to be so weak and what had caused their treasure spirits to be so crude. Everything was instantly grasped by him. With a thought, a faint smile appeared on his face. These treasures had experienced countless years in order to grow to their current level. Due to the accumulation of time, they all possessed enormous potential. As long as he fused the profound light into them, they would be able to transform into the treasures. As long as he merged the mysterious light into them, he could make some adjustments during the process. Each of these magical treasures could reach the peak of the 6th level. Moreover, their natures would also change. It was no longer the same as before because the Crystal Palace had been tempered by the void water for a long period of time. These magical treasures were of different levels. Some were at the 4th level, some were at the 5th level. However, compared to the mysterious light that was poured into them, their foundations were so weak that they could be ignored. Thus, what determined their level after they were refined was not their original level, but the mysterious light. Thus, they could all become 6th level magical treasures. With Luo Fan's cultivation, the moment he saw the structure of these magical treasures, he had already figured out how to adjust them. Thus, before the smile on his face disappeared, he began to move. With a thought, the 9 balls of light that flickered with various colors began to change wildly. The wonderful lines, symbols, patterns, words, and other existences within the light began to reorganize and reproduce wildly. In the span of a few breaths, their number increased by 1,000 times. The area occupied by the glowing bodies also expanded by several times. The entire space on the 1st floor of the tower was almost completely filled with this brilliance under this change. This change lasted for a full 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, the 9 balls of light that had expanded to the limit suddenly stopped, then quickly shrunk. In the blink of an eye, they had shrunk into 9 artifacts that emitted powerful auras. These artifacts were a purified bottle, a copper hammer, a sacrificial altar, a 33-story pagoda, a brick-like seal, a 4-feet-long sword, a bronze mirror, a small cup with 2 coiling dragons on it, and a short writing brush. These artifacts floated in the air, each emitting an aura that shook the void. It was as if the void could not withstand their existence. Within these artifacts, there seemed to be some life gradually awakening from their slumber, causing the vitality of these artifacts to become denser and denser. These artifacts became more and more agile, and the auras they emitted became more and more powerful. After a few breaths of time, moans came from the 9 artifacts, as if they had just woken up from a dream. Then, the 9 artifacts shook in the void, scattered, and condensed again, turning into 9 boys and girls. These 9 boys and girls were all 7 or 8 years old, and each of them looked like they were carved from jade. Even though Luo Fan's aesthetic standards were not very similar to the creatures of the great Tianyuan world, he still felt that these gorilla-like boys were very cute. The 9 boys looked at each other, then looked at their own bodies. They all let out loud cheers, and after chattering for a while, they landed and knelt down in front of Luo Fan. They said in unison, "Greetings, Master." "Thank you, Master, for your help." These boys were naturally the treasure spirits of the 9 magic treasures. The source of their intelligence was still the original crude and weak intelligence of the 9 magic treasures. But after being reforged by Luo Fan, their intelligence had increased by who knew how many times. At this moment, they were not much different from normal people. Moreover, because the imprints of their original owners had been completely scattered by Luo Fan, now that they had awakened, they naturally recognized Luo Fan as their master. Luo Fan looked at the 9 boys, feeling quite satisfied. What he was satisfied with was naturally not the attitude of the 9 children. Instead, he was satisfied that the 9 enchanted treasures had all fulfilled his predetermined goal. All of them had become Tier 6 enchanted treasures, bringing out the original potential of the enchanted treasures with mysterious light. To be continued. Chapter 790. After laughing, he raised his hand to help them up and said, "No need to be so polite. First published text, fastest updated text novels on the internet." Although the 9 treasure spirits already had the intelligence of a normal person, they had only just achieved it after all. They were like a piece of white paper and naturally listened to what Luo Fan said. Thus, they did not do much and just stood up with a smile. They surrounded Luo Fan and started asking all sorts of questions. Luo Fan smiled and casually said a few words before sending them away and leading them out of the tower. The surface of the tower did not seem to be any different from before. It was still exactly the same. However, the aura it emitted was no longer as ferocious as before. Instead, it seemed to have become an extremely ordinary tower. This tower was also a rare artifact, but it did not arouse his desire to take it. Thus, he could not be bothered to take it. At this moment, the surrounding bone powder was only about 10% less than at the beginning. Ba Yuan, on the other hand, was already surrounded by boundless heart fire. He floated in the air, emitting a lazy and bloated aura. It looked like he could no longer swallow any more bone powder. It was Ba Yuan. Although he had reached the peak of the 3rd step immortal realm, there was just too much bone powder. Moreover, the power contained within was too strong. He could only barely absorb and refine close to 10% of the bone powder. After swallowing so much bone powder and refining the nearly limitless power into heart fire, the various principles and mysteries that Ba Yuan had comprehended over the past few days had finally completely transformed into his own. Finally, it had completely transformed into his cultivation realm, pushing his cultivation realm to the peak of the 3rd step immortal realm. Raising his cultivation to this level, 8 Yuan had already fallen into a bottleneck. No matter how much energy he absorbed, it would be difficult for him to raise his own cultivation level. As a result, after he had barely refined an unknown amount of bone powder, he had become like this. At this moment, he only felt that his body was filled with boundless heart fire. The heart fire had even filled up his body, mind, and sea of consciousness, making it difficult for him to even circulate his mind. He even had a feeling that if he were to absorb any more energy, his entire body would explode and turn into dust. The appearance of this feeling caused Ba Yuan to finally understand that the fate between him and the bone powder in front of him had come to an end. He could not help but sigh helplessly. "Ba Yuan, if you're willing, I might be able to help you collect the bone powder so that you can slowly refine it." At this time, Feng Ling, who was not far away, said with a smile. Every speck of bone powder was like a mountain to Ba Yuan. Even though his cultivation had risen to the peak of the 3rd step immortal realm and the bone powder was not as heavy to him as before, it was still beyond his ability to collect the remaining bone powder. However, to Feng Ling, who was at the 6th stage immortal realm, it was nothing. Although the bone powder had some power, it was just an ordinary item. It was difficult for it to cause any pressure on him. Nothing could be better. "Thank you, Senior Feng Ling." Ba Yuan was overjoyed. "Don't be in such a hurry to thank me. I have a condition." Feng Ling raised her hand to stop Ba Yuan. Hearing this, Ba Yuan's joy was slightly reduced. He said, "Senior Feng Ling, please speak." "It's nothing. In the future, you will do whatever I say. If I say you can't do something, you will not do it." Feng Ling laughed. Feng Ling was no different from Ba Yuan in terms of quality. One was Luo Fan's magic treasure, and the other was his servant. They both had to call Luo Fan master, and the level of Feng Ling's body was 3 levels higher than Ba Yuan's. Why would it need anything from Ba Yuan? At this time, she said this only because she thought it was interesting. As long as it doesn't conflict with master's orders, it's naturally not a problem. Ba Yuan said, "That's good, that's good," Feng Ling said and turned around. She turned around and suddenly transformed into the shape of the magic treasure with the triangular flag. After transforming into this magic treasure, the vertical flag produced an indescribable suction force. It directly acted on the many bone powder around the tower. In an instant, hundreds of bone powder formed a long river and poured into the Feng Ling flag from all directions. After a while, the bone powder around the tower was swallowed up in an instant. The space around the tower was cleaned up. Even the bones that were still intact were completely absorbed into Feng Ling's body. Feng Ling was a magic treasure for sealing. There was naturally a huge space inside, not to mention containing the powder. Even if the volume of the powder was increased by tens of thousands of times, it would not be any pressure. These changes happened after Luo Fan left the gate of the tower. Because the two of them were not facing the gate of the tower, they did not see Luo Fan come out. Seeing that they had finished collecting the bone powder, Luo Fan did not pester them and said, "Let's go." When Luo Fan spoke, Bai Yuan and Feng Ling realized that Luo Fan had already left the tower. They could not help but be shocked and hurriedly bowed in response. Bai Yuan carefully withdrew his heart flame back into his body, allowing it to settle down in his heart once more. His slightly deformed body descended. After this was done, he and Feng Ling were surprised to find that there were 9 young boys and girls around 7 or 8 years old next to Luo Fan. They could not help but be extremely curious. However, due to their identities, it was impossible for them to ask Luo Fan directly. Therefore, they could only suppress this curiosity in their hearts and wait for the next time they had time to ask the young boys and girls. Seeing that Bai Yuan and Feng Ling were being so careful, the 9 treasure spirits finally restrained themselves and did not dare to be as presumptuous as before. Luo Fan did not care about them and directly began to advance in the direction of the magic treasure corresponding to the spirit guide. Bai Yuan and the others did not dare to be negligent and followed behind Luo Fan. This time, Luo Fan didn't stop and walk like before, stopping to study any interesting building he saw. Instead, he directly moved towards that location purposefully. This extremely purposeful approach made Bai Yuan and Feng Ling finally understand that the situation was different this time. For a moment, they became even more solemn, but they didn't even dare to say anything, let alone ask about the identity of those boys and girls. However, although they did not dare to speak, Feng Ling and Bai Yuan observed along the way. They also had a guess about the identity of the 9 young boys and girls. Feng Ling did not need to say anything. He was a 6th rank magic treasure, and these young boys and girls were also the treasure spirits of the 6th rank magic treasure. There was an extremely subtle relationship between them. Therefore, it did not take long for him to see through these young boys and girls. He knew that they were not living creatures, but the treasure spirits of magic treasures like him. Understanding this, he naturally guessed that they were the magic treasures that his master had obtained in the Crystal Palace. As for why these magic treasures suddenly became treasure spirits and became 6th rank magic treasures, it was not difficult for him to understand. After all, it was his master's divine ability. He had already experienced it personally, so what was strange about it allowing them to become 6th rank magic treasures? Bai Yuan and Feng Ling were not the same. He was not the same as these young boys and girls, and his cultivation was only at the peak of the 3rd rank immortal realm. Therefore, he could only feel that each of these 9 people was many times stronger than him. Each of them could easily crush him to death and turn him into minced meat. This kind of feeling was naturally quite frustrating for him. However, almost all of the living creatures that he had faced these days had this kind of ability. Even if he was extremely uncomfortable, he gradually got used to this kind of frustration. Therefore, the frustration did not exist in his heart for too long before he dispelled it. In this way, compared to the past, his ability to adjust his mentality had greatly improved. Bai Yuan and Feng Ling did not dare to speak. Although the young boys and girls felt that Luo Fan was extremely imposing, they had not personally experienced it. Therefore, they were much more courageous than Bai Yuan and Feng Ling. Therefore, Bai Yuan and Feng Ling did not open their mouths to question them. Finally, they could not help but surround Bai Yuan and Feng Ling with questions. Ba Yuan and Feng Ling glanced at their master, Luo Fan. Seeing that he did not seem to mind, they sighed in relief and began to answer the many questions of the 9 treasure spirits. Through these questions, the two of them finally completely understood the identity of the treasure spirits of the 9 magic treasures. They even taught these treasure spirits the rules that they had to abide by. This caused the 11 people behind Luo Fan to gradually become orderly. Gradually, they were no longer as chaotic as before. Luo Fan did not care about these things, nor could he be bothered to care about them. Along the way, although he did not waste any time to study the buildings that he passed by, he did not rush to the place where the 7th-tier magic treasure was hidden. He continued to walk unhurriedly. At first glance, there seemed to be no difference from the entire journey before. The reason why he was still so unhurried, even when the Bloodwood King and the others were there, was because he felt that the Bloodwood King and the others were only in the 6th-tier immortal realm. However, he felt that King Bloodwood and the others were only at the 6th stage of the immortal realm. Even if the magic treasure didn't have the slightest ability to resist, it would be absolutely impossible for them to refine it in a few days. So, he didn't have to worry about the magic treasure being taken away by others. So, he naturally didn't have to be anxious. A distance of several thousand miles was naturally nothing for Luo Fan and the others. Without stopping and walking, they went straight to their destination. In just half an hour, Luo Fan, his magic treasure, and his servants passed through hundreds of layers of heaven and earth and arrived at his destination, the place where the 7th-tier magic treasure was hidden. Along the way, although Luo Fan did not stop to study the buildings, he only glanced at most of them from the outside. Combined with the nature of the layers of heaven and earth that he passed by, he could roughly guess what they were. Therefore, along the way, he had gained a lot. He felt that his horizons had been widened, and he seemed to be a little closer to truly creating a cultivation method. The nature of the layer of heaven and earth where the magic treasure was hidden was special. It was filled with countless complex and mysterious fluctuations. These fluctuations seemed to be extremely chaotic, but they faintly formed some kind of resonance with something in the outside world. Standing outside the layer of heaven and earth, Luo Fan casually grabbed at a few of the invisible fluctuations. After a slight analysis, he roughly understood the functions of these fluctuations. These fluctuations were clearly the various powers outside the layer of heaven and earth that were transferred into the layer of heaven and earth through some kind of resonance. They increased some of the wondrous characteristics of the layer of heaven and earth, causing the layer of heaven and earth to continuously rise to a certain level. The leaders of those forces must have used these fluctuations to cross the layers of barriers to enter the layer of heaven and earth, Luo Fan thought. In reality, the layer of heaven and earth here had already surpassed the limits of what many beings could explore on the surface. In a certain place before this, which was also the limit of exploration, there was a layer of heaven and earth. That layer of heaven and earth was extremely destructive to all beings who had not reached the 7th tier of the celestial realm. Almost all cultivators who had not reached the 7th tier of the celestial realm, and even their souls, would be left in that layer of heaven and earth. This kind of change was almost fatal to all beings who had not reached the 7th tier of the celestial realm. The reason why Luo Fan and the others were able to pass through that layer of heaven and earth so easily was because of their respective characteristics. Luo Fan was in existence at the peak of the disbanded celestial of the great all-embracing heaven. Needless to say, as for Feng Ling and the other 9 treasure spirits, they were treasure spirits of magic treasures, which were completely different from cultivators. The characteristics of leaving the power of cultivators and their souls in the layer of heaven and earth did not have much effect on them. Therefore, they were naturally able to pass through the layer of heaven and earth easily. The reason why Ba Yuan was able to pass through it so easily was that Luo Fan had given him a thin layer of defense at that moment, completely isolating him from the layer of heaven and earth. Therefore, although he had crossed the layer of heaven and earth, it was no different from not crossing at all. Naturally, he could also pass through it easily. However, after passing through the limit of the layer of heaven and earth, there was not much danger in the next few layers of heaven and earth. At most, it would only make Feng Ling and the others feel some pressure. Therefore, it was as if they had not felt anything when they arrived outside the layer of heaven and earth. This fluctuation is somewhat beneficial to living beings. If one is immersed in this fluctuation, if one is lucky and resonates with some kind of fluctuation, I'm afraid that one can obtain the information accumulated over countless years in that fluctuation. Luo Fan thought, so as he led everyone into the layer of heaven and earth. The moment he stepped in, his body trembled, and endless information surged into his mind like a tidal wave. In a trance, Luo Fan seemed to have turned into an invisible and intangible existence that had experienced hundreds of millions of years. The creation of heaven and earth, the prosperity of heaven and earth, and the turbulence of heaven and earth. The decline of heaven and earth. All of this flashed through his mind like a fleeting view of flowers on horseback. This kind of feeling was the infinite information carried by the many fluctuations in the layer of heaven and earth after countless years. This information was the projection of heaven and earth, which almost contained the entire evolution process of the ruins from the creation of the world to this moment, and contained countless secrets of heaven and earth. Of course, fluctuations were just fluctuations. Without fluctuations of intelligence, it was impossible to comprehend laws, and grand Tao. As a result, although the information contained in the ripples contained countless secrets of the world and the ruins, if one wanted to refine the secrets related to laws and laws needed for cultivation, it would only be possible if one had supreme wisdom. As Luo Fan received the endless information, Ba Yuan also stepped into the layer of heaven and earth. The moment he stepped into the layer of heaven and earth, Ba Yuan's eyes suddenly became blank. The heart fire in his heart suddenly erupted. It directly wrapped around his body. However, this time, the heart fire did not just remain in this state. It continued to rush up and instantly formed a cloud of fire above his head. This cloud of fire was invisible, and it constantly churned and fluctuated violently. The endless fluctuations in the layer of heaven and earth seemed to be stirred up by this cloud of fire, and almost all the fluctuations moved away from the cloud of fire. Only an extremely faint wisp of energy was attracted by the fiery cloud, and it was sucked into it, causing the fiery cloud to instantly explode and expand 100-fold. Then, it rapidly shrank until it was 10,000 times its original size, down to 1% of its original size. As the heart fire condensed, Ba Yuan suddenly let out a long roar. A soft sound came from his body, as if some kind of barrier had been pierced. Then, the aura around his body surged out and instantly increased by more than 100 times. At the same time, the blank look in his eyes disappeared without a trace, and it turned into a clear and bright look that saw through everything. I've finally broken through. I never thought that I would actually be able to reach rank 4. He let out a long breath, and the cloud of fire that had already condensed to 100th of its original size slowly descended and wrapped around his body. It began to frantically drill into his body, burning his soul, burning everything in his body, causing his body, soul, and everything else to continuously rise. In just a short while, he stabilized at a level that was 100 times stronger than before. That was the level of rank 4 Immortal Realm. However, he was extremely lucky. The moment he stepped into this layer of heaven and earth, he resonated with that wisp of seemingly weak fluctuation and instantly received a large amount of information from that fluctuation. In an instant, he seemed to have transformed into another form of existence that had experienced tens of millions of years. And these tens of millions of years seemed to have really taken effect on him, polishing his cultivation to become smooth and perfect. Finally, when the conditions were right, he naturally broke through the barrier of rank 3 Immortal Realm and truly stepped into rank 4 Immortal Realm. This was his opportunity, and also the result of the power of the many corpses and bone powder that he had obtained earlier. It was something that others could not be envious of. To be continued. Chapter 791. Remember, just as Bai Yuan obtained enormous benefits and broke through the bottleneck that he originally didn't know how long it would take for him to break through, Luo Fan was still immersed in the infinite information contained within the infinite fluctuations. Text first appeared. Baidu search engine. Net, read novels the fastest update. // Ba Yuan resonated with a weak fluctuation by chance, so he obtained all the information contained within the fluctuation since its birth. However, Luo Fan was different from him. Luo Fan directly used his powerful will to communicate with the numerous fluctuations and directly obtain the infinite information contained within them. The difference between these two methods caused each of them to obtain completely different results. The information Luo Fan obtained could be said to be more than 1,000,000,000,000 times more than Bai Yuan. Even though his will and the 830th consciousness was countless times stronger than Bai Yuan's, it still took him a lot more time than Bai Yuan to sort out the information. After waiting for another quarter of an hour, when Bai Yuan's body, power, and heart fire had completely stabilized, Luo Fan slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, there seemed to be an infinite amount of mysterious light flashing through his eyes. It was as if the infinite laws, and even the great Tao were flowing through his eyes at this moment. After letting out a long breath, Luo Fan's expression returned to normal. However, Bai Yuan and the treasure spirits faintly felt that the master in front of them seemed to have undergone some kind of wonderful change. This change was extremely mysterious, beyond the limits of their perception. As a result, they could only feel that some kind of change had appeared on his body, but they had no idea what it was or what it meant. Apart from Luo Fan and Bai Yuan, the treasure spirits of Feng Ling and the other treasure spirits didn't feel anything. To them, the fluctuations didn't seem to exist at all. They didn't move away from them, nor did they resonate with them. It was as if they were just ordinary objects. The reason for this was very simple. They were just objects. Although the treasure spirit of the magic treasure had a wisdom level of 830, it was still just a magic treasure. They weren't living beings, so they naturally couldn't obtain the infinite information contained within the fluctuations through resonance. However, the magical treasures were spiritual, and they had long understood their limitations. He also had his own path, but he was not discouraged by this difference. They just followed closely behind Luo Fan and stood in a special order, as if they were waiting on Luo Fan. Luo Fan naturally wouldn't care about what they did. At this moment, he was observing the world level in front of him, sensing the various auras in this world level, searching for a hidden space-time in this world level. There was a small hill in the heaven and earth level that was only a few hundred feet tall. The area it covered was only a few thousand feet. Although it could barely be called a mountain, in the eyes of Luo Fan, Bai Yuan, and the others, it was just a pile of rocks. The mountain was filled with jagged rocks. Looking at the distribution of the rocks, it seemed to fit the requirements of some kind of formation, drawing in all the power in the world. This caused a miraculous cycle of power to form in this world, causing every strand of power to fluctuate. They would inevitably flow through this hill. If this hill was the main body, it was as if all the power in this world level and all the fluctuations were born from the hill's breathing. Luo Fan looked at the hill and couldn't help but praise it. Although the hill was small, it carried an ancient aura because it had experienced countless years. Just by standing there and looking at the hill, one could feel an ancient aura surging into one's heart. Naturally, one would feel insignificant and feel that the hill was huge. Although the formation formed by the many strange rocks on the hill was mysterious, it didn't have any defensive power. It couldn't stop any living being from stepping on it. Therefore, Luo Fan didn't make any preparations and directly stepped onto the hill with Feng Ling, Bai Yuan, and the others. The moment they stepped onto the hill, Luo Fan's incomparably sharp perception felt as if the world had changed slightly. This change didn't reach the point of isolating the inside from the outside and turning the hill into another space-time. However, it also formed some kind of boundary, making him feel the aura of a different space-time. As for Feng Ling, Ba Yuan, and the others, their perception was countless times worse than Luo Fan's, so they didn't feel this at all. They only knew to follow behind Luo Fan, not daring to leave. Although they didn't sense anything special about this place, it was obvious that this was their master's destination. What their powerful master wanted to do here was not something they could control. However, since such a powerful master had taken a liking to this place, then this place was definitely not simple. In this state of mind, they would naturally feel a spiritual pressure and feel that the surrounding environment was different from other places. Very soon, Luo Fan led them to the top of the hill. There was a stone door that was 30 feet tall here. This stone door was tightly shut. There were no decorations on the entire stone door, and the structure was extremely simple. There were no words or pictures to mark this stone door. Luo Fan frowned slightly before relaxing his brows and smiling. He understood that the space-time was behind this stone door. Moreover, he also understood that Bloodwood King and the others had indeed come here and used some method to open the stone door, allowing them to enter the stone door together. The reason why he was so certain of this was because he could sense traces of mysterious auras left behind by Bloodwood King and the others around the stone gate, and they were close to disappearing without a trace. The existence of these auras was meaningless to ordinary cultivators, as they couldn't let them discover anything. However, for Luo Fan, it was as conspicuous as a fly on a white wall. It was enough for him to instantly know how many people had stayed here, how long they had stayed, and where they had finally gone. There were a total of 9 people, and they should have fought a few times before reaching a compromise and entering the door together, Luo Fan speculated. This information was deduced from the changes in the auras, and although there was no other evidence to prove it, he didn't doubt it. However, this was meaningless to him, so he didn't look for any evidence to prove himself. He walked up to the door and carefully sensed it. The door was simple. There were no decorations on it, and there were no lines or words on it. It seemed very ordinary, but it was clear that this door was not ordinary. There had to be endless mysteries contained within it, and there had to be a special method to open this door. As he sensed it, the door gradually disintegrated in his mind, and the barrier covering its surface was gradually torn apart by him. The material used to build this stone door was not ordinary stone, but hundreds of thousands of materials that were piled together in an extremely strange way. Each of these materials was an extremely rare refining material in the great Tianyuan world. If one scooped out, any one of them would be enough for an immortal realm cultivator to spend millions of years refining it into a magic treasure. The hundreds of thousands of materials piled together to build this stone door could be called extravagant. These hundreds of thousands of materials were separated, and no 2 materials were fused together. The entire door was like a door made of sand. This method of construction was very strange, as if the stone door would collapse with a gentle push. It would directly turn into a pile of sand. But in reality, there was an extremely subtle connection between any 2 materials among these hundreds of thousands of materials. This kind of subtle connection was not produced by external forces, but by the special environment formed by the hundreds of thousands of requirement stones. The power contained in these requirement stones was not produced by external forces. It was precisely because of this extremely mysterious connection that this door, which was constructed from hundreds of thousands of stones, was unimaginably stable. Even Luo Fan felt that if he wanted to break this door, he would need to use all of his strength, and there was no guarantee of success. It must be said that the power of Luo Fan's ability was already enough to destroy the world. Even if there was a great 1,000 world in front of him, he could easily destroy it. However, even with the power of this divine ability, it did not have absolute confidence in destroying these stone gates. This was enough to show how sturdy these gates were, and how intricate and profound the secrets contained within these gates were. At this moment, Luo Fan was interested in everything he had never seen in the great heaven primal world that was related to cultivation. How could he let go of such a wondrous opportunity to use hundreds of thousands of materials to build a door like this? In just an instant, everything related to this door entered his mind and was deeply engraved in the depths of his memory. The principles contained within these hundreds of thousands of materials were unfathomable. Moreover, the special characteristics of the materials were incomparably close, almost inseparable. Thus, for a moment, Luo Fan couldn't completely understand the principles within. However, although he couldn't completely understand the principles, he could find a way to enter and exit the door. To him, this wasn't difficult at all. The key to this door is actually the Magic Treasure's spirit guide. No wonder. After understanding the method to enter and exit the door, Luo Fan couldn't help but be shocked. The spirit guide of a magic treasure was naturally born from the world because of the magic treasure's birth. It was a mysterious existence that was compatible with the magic treasure, a trace of vitality left behind by the magic treasure. This kind of existence was something that ordinary creatures had only heard of but never seen. Under these circumstances, there was actually someone who could use the spirit guide to such a degree. Not only did it change the nature of the energy it was attached to, but it was also used as a key to enter and exit the door. This method of using the spirit guide could almost be said to have reached the acme of perfection. The spirit guide, which ordinary creatures couldn't see, was treated as ordinary stones. How could he not be shocked? However, at the same time, Luo Fan gradually gave birth to a feeling of excitement. Wasn't this the kind of existence he was looking for? With a slight thought, the spirit guide that he had put away in his universe within sleeve appeared in front of him. The moment the spirit guide appeared, the stone door slightly trembled. The two doors slowly opened to reveal the world behind the door. A spirit guide could normally only bring one creature into the door. This restriction was directly engraved in the stone door's source. Ordinary creatures with spirit roots could not violate it. But this was nothing to Luo Fan. With a thought, Ba Yuan and the others were directly put into his universe within sleeve. Their auras were completely isolated, not a single bit leaked out. Then he held the spirit guide and directly stepped into the door. The moment he stepped into the door, he felt as if he had passed through a barrier of time and space. In the blink of an eye, time and space changed, and he arrived at another time and space. When everything stabilized, Luo Fan suddenly had a thought. He suddenly felt as if he had already left the eternal forest and arrived at the boundless world outside the eternal forest. Once this thought appeared, he sensed his surroundings and found that the surrounding laws, and even the Grand Tao were slightly different from the outside world. This subtle difference caused these laws, and even the Grand Tao to be twisted back. It completely eliminated the eternal forest laws, and even the Grand Tao, making all the laws, and even the Grand Tao become the same as the world outside the eternal forest. So, it's like this, there's actually this kind of magical power. The person who created this world was at least an existence in the 9th rank of the immortal realm. If they didn't do this, they wouldn't be able to twist the laws back. Luo Fan secretly became vigilant. The reason why the eternal forest could twist the laws, and even the Grand Tao was because of the accumulation of countless years. It was accumulated bit by bit over an incomparably long period of time. It was the result of gathering all of the ancient tree's power in one place that even numbers could not describe. This kind of distortion was almost a qualitative distortion. Even if this world of ruins was not the same space-time as the eternal forest, it still couldn't escape this distortion. It was still attached to the laws, and even the Grand Tao. Although the space-time was different, there was no difference from the eternal forest. Even the powerful existence that created the world of ruins couldn't twist the laws, and Grand Tao of the eternal forest. It could be imagined how difficult it was to twist all these things. But here, there was actually a world that could twist everything back to normal. It could be imagined how powerful the existence that created this world was. With his heart on high alert, Luo Fan carefully looked around. He found that this space-time was very different from the outside world of ruins. There was no sky, no earth, and no mountains or rivers here. Plants. The entire space-time had no top or bottom, No left or right. It was just a patch of gray. It was like the void of the universe. This space-time was endless, and it was filled with incomparably dense heaven and earth origin chi. This heaven and earth origin chi was different from the eternal forest heaven and earth origin chi. It didn't have the kind of rich vitality that was beneficial to artifacts, but it was also different from the heaven and earth origin chi that Luo Fan felt before. Compared to the heaven and earth origin chi, this heaven and earth origin chi seemed to have some more mysterious things. It was these mysterious things that gave this heaven and earth origin chi a trace of heaven and earth origin chi, giving it a trace of the characteristics of heaven and earth origin chi. Suddenly, Luo Fan understood. This heaven and earth origin chi. It was the time when the heaven and earth origin chi was in the great desolate world. The heaven and earth origin chi was in the middle of evolving into heaven and earth origin chi. Understanding this, he couldn't help being shocked. I never thought that this world would exist even longer than I expected. Suddenly, he understood the space-time he was in, the world he was in right now. It was very likely that it had existed countless years before the ancient ruins were opened. It was even possible that it had existed before the eternal forest existed. The reason why he made this guess was because this space-time was filled with heaven and earth origin chi. This heaven and earth origin chi could not be born out of thin air. Even if a cultivator wanted to use the heaven and earth origin chi from the outside world, it would be impossible for them to reach this stage. Using heaven and earth origin chi from the outside world was much simpler. Therefore, it was most likely that when this space-time was created, when this world was opened, the outside world was filled with this kind of heaven and earth origin chi. The heaven and earth origin chi was a perfect world. It was formed after going through at least 9 great tribulations. When such a world was filled with innate vitality, it was definitely at the beginning of the world's creation. Even the current number of years could not be described, and it would take at least trillions of years to barely touch the edge of the year. With such a long history, even if there were trillions of years when heaven and earth origin chi was filled with heaven and earth origin chi, compared to this period of history, it was only the beginning. It was almost negligible and insignificant. In this kind of situation, the transformation of heaven and earth origin chi from heaven and earth origin chi from heaven and earth origin chi, it could be imagined how much time had passed. Thinking of this, Luo Fan suddenly became even more interested in the world of ruins. What did the master of this world of ruins want to do by placing this space-time here? As Luo Fan thought of this, he took a step forward and stepped into the gray space in front of him. As for Ba Yuan and the others, he didn't have any intention of letting them out. His original goal seemed even more insignificant at this moment. A space-time that had existed for such a long time was no longer something that Ba Yuan and the others could come into contact with. In a space-time with such a long history, the value of a level 7 magic treasure was almost incomparable. With the opportunity to explore this space-time, why would he still treat the magic treasure as his main goal? Of course, this didn't mean that he would completely stop looking for the level 7 magic treasure. On the contrary, he had to work harder to find it. After all, this level 7 magic treasure had existed in this space-time for an unknown period of time. To explore this space-time, starting from that magic treasure was the best choice. Therefore, as Luo Fan sensed his surroundings, he searched for the location of his power. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qijian to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Remember, Chapter 792. Remember, he had purposely sent his power into this space-time through the spirit guide, so his current location was naturally the location of the 7th-tier magic treasure. First written text, / after entering the space-time, he was no longer separated by different space-times. He could sense his power even more clearly. He could even vaguely see what the surroundings of his power looked like. Of course, seeing the scene clearly was on a whole other level. Even if he could sense the power so clearly, everything he saw was still blurry. In addition, the scene he saw was filled with endless brilliance, so it was difficult to see what the power around him looked like. At this moment, the laws of the space-time, the Law 831, and even the Great Tao were distorted by some indescribable existence and returned to the state outside the eternal forest in the great sky origin world. The world's energy filled with traces of innate energy, as if it was in the middle of changing from innate to acquired. Walking in this kind of space-time was a rare experience for Luo Fan. Although he had not been outside the eternal forest for long, this place seemed exactly the same as the outside world, but also contained many characteristics that the outside world did not have. Walking in this space-time naturally made him feel like he was walking in the endless years of the great sky origin world. This was naturally a new experience for him. Along the way, Luo Fan sensed traces of the existence of 9 auras. They were obviously the rulers of the 9 great forces around the ancient ruins, including the Bloodwood King. They had entered this space-time several hours earlier than Luo Fan. At this time, they were already one step ahead of him. It was unknown where they had gone. Luo Fan walked all the way, sensing the mysteries of the surrounding space-time, trying hard to obtain all kinds of information in this space-time. This was obviously not a simple matter. All the energy in this space-time circulated in a cycle, so every bit of energy did not exist for a very long time. At most, it would only exist for hundreds of thousands or millions of years. The energy from before had long been eliminated by the cycle of the world and transformed into the energy that existed now. Furthermore, this space-time did not have the fluctuations of the world in the outside world. Besides the laws, and grand Taos, there were no other existences that could truly carry the information left behind over the years. Clearly, he wanted to completely absorb the information contained in the rules, laws, and even the great Tao. The power of this divine art had already surpassed the limits of what Luo Fan could do, and even surpassed the limits of what immortals could achieve. Under such circumstances, Luo Fan's efforts naturally wouldn't amount to much. As he flew, Luo Fan gradually approached the location of his power. After a few minutes, he frowned. A look of surprise appeared on his face. So their target is actually this magic treasure as well. Such a thought flashed through his mind. At this moment, he had already sensed the presence of several rank 6 Immortal Realm auras. Those auras were extremely familiar to him. They belonged to the rulers of the forces around the ruins, including the Bloodwood King. Seems like it's quite a coincidence. Luo Fan sighed. He suddenly sped up and flew towards that location. His original flying speed was already quite astonishing. Now that he sped up again, he almost turned into a ray of light. In just a few dozen breaths, he had crossed hundreds of thousands of kilometers, directly arriving at a location tens of millions of kilometers away from the entrance. From afar, he saw a huge sphere with a diameter of thousands of kilometers floating in the boundless void. The surrounding void's dusky scene had completely changed where the sphere was. The entire sphere was like a world of its own, creating a paradise out of thin air in the boundless void. There was a faint 5-colored brilliance on the sphere, covering it up. The 5-colored brilliance was very restrained, as if it was limited to a certain area on the surface by an indescribable force. Therefore, from the outside, Luo Fan could only see a faint 5-colored luster on the surface of the sphere. He couldn't see how strong the brilliance was, nor could he see the surface state of the sphere through the brilliance. It's similar to the planets in the universe, Luo Fan thought to himself. With a thought, he raised his hand and grabbed at the air. A wisp of 5-colored light was suddenly pulled out from the surface of the sphere. Although the 5-colored light was just light, it was unimaginably heavy. Just the wisp of light in Luo Fan's hand made him feel like he was moving an iron mountain that was millions of meters tall. Fortunately, even moving such a heavy mountain did not pose any pressure to Luo Fan at all. Otherwise, he might have to make a second attempt to grab the ray of light. After the light fell into Luo Fan's hands, Luo Fan's eyes lit up. It began to tremble violently and struggle madly. It was like a living creature. Faintly, the brilliance was still there. A spoonful sigh reflects on the ridge of Ing Lan Ing. Words? P. With a thought, Luo Fan enveloped the light with an unparalleled will. It completely suppressed the spirituality contained in the light. The light instantly softened and lay on Luo Fan's palm like a ribbon. Its two ends hung down to Luo Fan's ankles. However, it did not dissipate, nor did it disappear. Only then did Luo Fan carefully comprehend the brilliance. So, it's the treasure light of a magic treasure. No wonder it's so heavy and so spiritual. As he sensed it, Luo Fan understood what this brilliance was. He even understood the rough function and power of this brilliance. This brilliance was the treasure light of the 7th rank magic treasure. It was also the power of the 7th rank magic treasure. This brilliance was extremely mysterious. Although it was illusory, it had all the qualities of a physical body. It could almost transform into anything, and could even evolve into countless living creatures. This brilliance made this magic treasure nearly omnipotent. There were no limitations to its function. As long as the owner of this magic treasure wanted it, it was very possible that it could obtain it. However, it was a pity that the spirituality contained within the brilliance did not transform. It was still only spirituality. There was no sign of it transforming into spirituality. From this, it could be deduced that this magic treasure was a typical magic treasure of the great heaven primal world. Even though it had such an amazing and limitless function, because it only had spirituality, it did not have a treasure spirit. Therefore, without a master, it was unable to perfectly unleash its power. Of course, if it had a master, then the situation would be completely different. Unless the master was truly useless, this magic treasure will be able to unleash earth-shattering godly power. It would be enough to make the living creature near invincible among the 7th rank. Understanding this, Luo Fan's thoughts moved. The numerous lights on the surface of the sphere suddenly began to fluctuate violently. The originally calm and reserved surface suddenly began to distort violently, as if something was violently struggling inside. After a while, the transformation of the multicolored brilliance seemed to have exceeded the limit it could reach. Somewhere in front of Luo Fan, the multicolored brilliance suddenly broke open a big hole, for which a force rushed out. This wave of power was the one that Luo Fan had released earlier, the one that had been mostly worn away by this magic treasure. After this wave of power, the large hole that had been broken open did not disappear. It was as if there was an unparalleled power pressing down on the hole. This caused the multicolored brilliance around the hole to wriggle wildly, wanting to withdraw. However, it was completely unable to close the hole, revealing a long passageway. It led directly to the depths of the sphere. Condensing the power in the palm of his hand, Luo Fan could not help but reveal a faint smile. Because the power had existed in the magic treasure for a long time, it was naturally contaminated with the power of the magic treasure. At this moment, it condensed in the palm of Luo Fan and formed a multicolored glass bead. It was by relying on this power and the connection between the magic treasure and the multicolored brilliance that he used his powerful willpower to control a portion of the multicolored brilliance, thus forming a passageway that led directly to the core of the magic treasure. This passageway was not straight, but twisted and winding, as if it was going around a maze. It was almost like a spiral that led to the center of the sphere. This sphere was thousands of kilometers in diameter, so its core was naturally unlikely to be on the surface of the sphere. Instead, it should be in the center of the sphere. Luo Fan dragged the multicolored glass bead and stepped into the passageway without hesitation. As soon as he stepped into the passageway, he felt his surroundings become much more stagnant, as if there was some kind of indescribable pressure around him. This pressure was because the surrounding multicolored brilliance had not been completely expelled. There was still some thinly spread out in the passageway, which was the pressure from the magic treasure. After all, the power that Luo Fan had released was only a trace. With this kind of power, it would be extremely easy for him to control a rank 4 or 5 magic treasure, or even a rank 6 magic treasure. However, for a rank 7 magic treasure, it was still not enough. Adding on the fact that it had only been a short period of time, although he could barely make the multicolored brilliance form a passageway, it was clearly impossible for him to perfectly control the multicolored brilliance. Naturally, there were a lot of multicolored brilliance that had fused more closely with the magic treasure that could not be controlled by that bit of power, so they naturally remained in the passageway. Naturally, they would put a lot of pressure on Luo Fan, who wanted to use forceful methods to get rid of them. Of course, although this pressure could not be ignored by Luo Fan, it could not hinder him too much. His speed did not decrease because of this. After entering the passageway, he found that the multicolored brilliance was incredibly bright and dazzling, even to the point of being blinding. If the brilliance completely spread out instead of being restrained on the surface of the sphere would definitely become the sun of this space-time, turning this space-time into a day. It would no longer be like this gray and hazy space. For ordinary people, even if it was just for an instant, this light would be enough to blind them and cause their souls to collapse. But for any cultivator in the immortal realm, it was nothing. For Luo Fan, who was in the 7th step immortal realm, it was not even enough to rouse his power to defend himself. It allowed him to completely withstand the light with his naked eyes and see everything within it clearly. Looking at the surface of the sphere, he saw that there was a world constructed from multicolored brilliance. Everything in this world was condensed from multicolored brilliance. There were mountains, rivers, and many plants and animals in this world. And all of this was completely condensed from the multicolored brilliance. However, because the multicolored brilliance that condensed into mountains, rivers, animals, and plants was extremely restrained, not much brilliance leaked out. As a result, the mountains, rivers, and creatures that were condensed from more brilliance appeared very dim. Compared to the surrounding multicolored brilliance, they were like many black shadows. He swept his gaze across. In an instant, Luo Fan could see almost everything on this side of the sphere that was facing him. In an instant, he discovered the existence of several creatures that were not condensed from the multicolored brilliance. Although Luo Fan was not familiar with these creatures, he had clearly sensed their auras several times. They were the rulers of the surrounding forces, including the Bloodwood King. At this moment, the few of them were running around in the multicolored world on the surface of the sphere, looking for something. From the looks of it, each of them was rather anxious, as if they wanted to find the object before the others. Luo Fan slightly sensed them and found that they all had something in common. That was hidden in their spirit souls was a strange, jade-like substance. Within that substance, there was a faint and insignificant spirit guiding aura. But sensing the existence of the token and the spirit guide aura, Luo Fan instantly came to a realization. He understood many things that he had not understood before. For example, why they entered this world of ruins, why they could enter this space-time, and why they entered this space-time. He could even vaguely deduce what they would do after entering this space-time. That jade token should be a kind of proof of qualification for inheritance, and the inheritance should be in this magic treasure. Even this magic treasure. And the reason why they could enter this space-time was because the jade token contained the magic treasure's spirit guide. It was this spirit guide that allowed them to pass through the door of space-time. After entering this space-time, it was even the spirit guide that led them into the multicolored brilliance. And now, what they were doing was either looking for clues to the inheritance or completing the inheritance test. As for what they did after entering the space-time, it should be to fight for the substance that activated the jade token, or some kind of fruit, or some kind of living creature, or some kind of power. No matter what, the result must be that the jade token could be completely activated. And the reason for the fight should be that the order in which the jade token was activated would have some impact on the inheritance. After a rough deduction, Luo Fan let go of this idea. No matter what, this had little to do with him, although they were existences in the 6th step immortal realm. And because they held power and had a backer, they had all kinds of methods to display power that exceeded their realm. But that meant nothing to Luo Fan. Even if there was a conflict with them, it would only bring him some trouble, and it would not really destroy his plan. Therefore, he naturally did not need to specifically deduce their various experiences. This passage led directly from the outside to the inside of the sphere. There was not much multicolored brilliance in it, but it was very conspicuous in this world that was filled with infinite multicolored brilliance. It looked as if there was a black passageway that went straight down from the sky, connecting to the underground of this world. Therefore, at this moment, the Bloodwood King and the others saw the passage the moment it appeared. They were all six-step immortal realm cultivators who controlled a force, so they were naturally quite intelligent. In just an instant, all of them guessed that this passage must have been opened by the seventh-step immortal that they did not care about before. And the meaning of this was not something they could guess at. Apart from scheming for this seventh-step magic treasure, what else could they do? The sphere was 1,000 miles in diameter. It looked huge, but for immortals, flying around the sphere 10 times would only take them a few breaths of time. However, the moment they saw this passage, none of them headed towards it. It was as if there was an unimaginable force restricting them, making it impossible for them to leave a certain area. In fact, Luo Fan could even see extreme unwillingness and anger on their faces. This should be the rule of the inheritance. Luo Fan was slightly surprised, but he quickly understood. Any inheritance would definitely have some rules to test the living beings who accepted it. Unless they passed the various tests and showed enough potential, no inheritance would descend upon them. At this moment, they were clearly in some kind of test, and it was this test that restricted them from leaving their area. In other words, unless they had the power to break the rule of this inheritance, which was the power of this seventh-step magic treasure, they could only continue to endure the test of this magic treasure and continue to search in their respective areas. But obviously, a seventh-step magic treasure was not limited by the physical body of a living being. Its power could be displayed beyond its level, and it could at least display the power of an eighth-step immortal realm cultivator. Of course, compared to a real eighth-step immortal realm cultivator, it was naturally far inferior. Even if the Bloodwood King and the others had all kinds of methods to display power beyond their level, they could not compare to this power. It was naturally impossible to break the rule of the inheritance. Under such circumstances, they could only watch as Luo Fan gradually walked into the depths of the magic treasure. Although they were extremely angry, they could only suppress it and could not vent it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Remember, Chapter 793. Welcome, everyone. Luo Fan didn't care about them at all. He quickly passed through the thick layer of colorful light and came into contact with the surface of the sphere. First written text, although the surface of the sphere was filled with even denser five-colored light that condensed into various shapes such as land, mountains, and rivers, it was directly torn apart by this passage, revealing the sphere that was covered by the five-colored light. As soon as it was torn apart, Luo Fan couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The size of the sphere was actually not thousands of kilometers in diameter as he had imagined, but only less than 5 kilometers in diameter. Outside the 5-kilometer diameter sphere, there was a thick layer of light that seemed to be thousands of kilometers in diameter. It was the unimaginably condensed light of the 5,832nd immortal realm. Due to the thick layer of five-colored light that was thousands of kilometers thick, it wrapped around the sphere that was 10 kilometers in diameter, making it seem like the sphere was thousands of kilometers in diameter. The degree of condensation of this five-colored brilliance was beyond imagination, almost becoming a real substance. Thus, for a moment, it actually fooled Luo Fan, causing him to mistakenly think that this magic treasure was thousands of miles in diameter. While moving forward in the passage, Luo Fan sensed the surrounding layer formed by the five-colored brilliance, comprehending the mysteries of the magic treasure contained within. The deeper he went, the more he felt that the magic treasure was not simple, and the more he wanted to seize it. With his speed, thousands of kilometers was only a matter of a few breaths. After a few breaths, Luo Fan had already stepped onto the body of the magic treasure. Although the magic treasure's diameter was hundreds of times smaller than it looked on the surface, in fact, it was still quite large. At the very least, Luo Fan's body was like a black dot on a ping-pong ball on top of such a magical weapon. This magic treasure was a multicolored sphere, and its surface was engraved with countless curved lines. The 8,332nd Immortal Realm, these lines were extremely complicated, and according to some unimaginable method, they outlined an unimaginably complex system. This system was incomparably mysterious. It seemed to be resonating with countless laws and laws from afar. Every single tremble of the system, every movement, every change could cause certain rules and laws to change. With a thought, Luo Fan's body had already stepped onto the sphere. At that moment, the magic treasure with a diameter of 5 kilometers trembled slightly. Then, millions of fluctuations were emitted from the magic treasure and swept across his body. These fluctuations were extremely mysterious detection fluctuations, as if they wanted to discover all the mysteries inside and outside of Luo Fan's body. Luo Fan's mind raced, and in the blink of an eye, he already understood that these countless fluctuations were not harmful to him at all. This should be the magic treasure's method of finding an inheritor. Therefore, he did not stop these fluctuations and let them sweep inside and outside of his body. In any case, there was nothing hidden about his body at this moment. Everything about him was completely like some kind of genius of the great Tianyuan world. It was impossible for a 7th-tier magic treasure to discover his true secrets. In the end, all the fluctuations retreated, and a door made of 5-colored light slowly opened in front of Luo Fan. Finally, all the fluctuations retreated, and a door made of 5-colored light slowly opened in front of Luo Fan. With a slight sense, Luo Fan knew that this door did not lead to a real place, but to an illusion. It led to a spiritual dwelling. With a thought, a strand of his will directly poured into the door made of 5-colored light. As soon as he entered, he heard a voice filled with endless vicissitudes, containing an aura of endless years. A voice that seemed to come from an immeasurably long time ago resounded, "Successor, since you are recognized by the heavenly Tao Pearl, no matter what kind of living being you are qualified to be the Venerable One's inheritor." Luo Fan's will condensed into a figure, and when he looked around, he found that he had appeared in a fairyland. The world here was boundlessly vast, and the sky was filled with 5-colored clouds. The ground was filled with countless strange flowers and plants, as well as divine beasts and spiritual medicines. The world was filled with endless natural vitality. Where he stood, the natural vitality seemed to have condensed into a solid form, forming a luxurious building. The person who spoke was an old man standing in front of him. Although the old man was only standing in front of him, the entire world and the endless buildings around him seemed to be born and destroyed because of the old man's will. The endless strange flowers and plants, divine beasts and spiritual medicines, and the endless natural vitality seemed to revolve around the old man. They were all born and destroyed because of the old man's will. When the old man spoke, the entire space-time and the entire world trembled subtly, as if they were echoing his words, and also as if they were naturally changing due to the change in his tone. Luo Fan looked at the old man and instantly knew that this was just an insignificant projection of a living being. It could not even be considered a clone of that living being, and it could not even compare to a trace of that living being's will. However, this projection could already emit an aura that surpassed this world and the stage 9 immortal realm. Pete tired? Strong? Difficult to Gu Luo Wei Yu and Song Duan Lu? Dream? Mechanical grade, Johann, Nabo 2? Impatient to travel on the earth in a hurry? P. This person is at least at the peak of Zenith Heaven Metal Path. Only such an existence can make me feel this way with just a little will. Luo Fan instantly made a judgment. I'm Luo Fan. Greetings, Senior. May I know how to address you? Senior? However, although he had made a judgment, his expression did not change at all. He only bowed and said, although this was just a projection, Luo Fan believed that an existence that could produce such a powerful aura and even cause his body and mind to be blocked, was definitely not someone that could not be communicated with. I'm Tao Master 5 Elements, and my successor is Luo Fan. Although you're already a stage 7 immortal, it seems that you haven't really chosen a path. It's just right for you to inherit the Tao of 5 elements. Are you willing to inherit this Tao? The old man's expression did not change, and he did not seem to be in the mood to talk to Luo Fan. After a few words, he changed the topic. Luo Fan smiled and said, "So, it's Tao Master 5 Elements. I haven't really chosen a path, and I'm choosing a path that's most suitable for me and has the best future. Although the Tao Master's Tao of 5 elements must be mysterious and unpredictable, I don't know if it's suitable for me. I wonder if the Tao Master can tell me more about this Tao?" The old man frowned and carefully looked at Luo Fan. After a while, he said, "Since you're not interested in inheriting the Tao of 5 elements, why are you looking for the Tao Master's inheritance?" At this moment, the old man's words were a little more lively. It seemed that because Luo Fan's answer was out of the ordinary, he had no choice but to talk to him. I'm here to find my own Tao. Yes, I'm looking for my own path. If Venerable Lord is willing, I wonder if I can have an exchange with you." Luo Fan was completely relaxed at this moment. "You're an interesting successor." The old man suddenly smiled and said, "The Tao Master is overpraising me." Luo Fan also smiled. The old man smiled and casually waved his hand, and the surrounding world changed. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a boundless starry sky, and 2 futons appeared under them. "Fine. I've existed for billions of years, and I've never communicated with real living beings. Since you're interested, I'll discuss the Tao with you." The old man smiled and made an inviting gesture. He directly sat on the futon. Luo Fan did not stand on ceremony. He was also sitting cross-legged on the praying mat that had appeared beneath him. The Tao Master has existed for billions of years. I wonder if the Tao Master's main body still exists? Luo Fan asked after sitting down. The Tao Master's main body. The old man's eyes showed a little confusion. After a while, he continued, "When the Tao Master's main body went to break through to the Saint Realm, he left the inheritance of the mixed essence Tao realm here. It's been billions of years, but the inheritance hasn't been taken back. Maybe he failed and died, or maybe he's still on the way." Hearing this, Luo Fan's eyes lit up. "I see. I wonder if the Tao Master can explain to me how to break through to the Saint Realm." Hearing this, the Tao Master of 5 elements laughed. "So you, the successor, have such ambition. Not bad, not bad. No wonder you haven't chosen a path even after reaching the peak of the 7th stage." Luo Fan was not embarrassed. He smiled and said, "Which cultivator in this world doesn't have the dream of becoming a saint? That's right, that's right. If it wasn't for becoming a saint, almost none of the countless Tao Masters in this world can live for more than 1,000,000,000,000 years. Why would the Tao Master's main body leave the Tao Master here?" The old man's expression was a little strange, and his words became a little chaotic. Although the words were a little chaotic, Luo Fan did not care. Instead, he would rather the words become more chaotic, because chaos was not an obstacle for him to understand, and he could reveal a lot of information he needed in his chaotic words. "I hope the Tao Master can give me some pointers." When the old man's expression gradually calmed down, Luo Fan could smell it. The old man did not lament anymore. He said, "There are countless ways to break through to the Saint Realm. But for Tao Masters who have surpassed the 9th stage, there's only one most convenient and direct way, and that is to set foot on the road to the Saint Realm. As long as you can reach the end of the road, you will naturally be a saint." The road to the Saint Realm? Luo Fan's eyes widened, and he cried out in surprise. Was it so easy to prove one's Tao and become a saint? Could it be that one only needed to take one road? How was this possible? One must know that the Saint Realm was a realm that could not be worn down by thousands of tribulations. It was eternal, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipotent. This realm was tens of thousands of times more powerful than even the creatures who had surpassed the 9th stage of the immortal realm. Could it be that such a huge gap could be overcome just by walking a single path? In an instant, Luo Fan denied it in his heart for the first time. No matter how dangerous or long a path was, there would definitely be a limit and an end. It was simply wishful thinking to comprehend the path of the saint through this path. However, he could not accept it no matter what. He could not believe it. As Luo Fan thought so, his expression returned to normal. Although the old man had not communicated with real creatures for tens of trillions of years since he was born, he still had the supreme power that surpassed the 9th stage of the immortal realm. Therefore, he easily discovered the meaning of the change in Luo Fan's expression. He could not help but laugh and said, "Successor, do you not believe in the existence of the road to the saint realm? I dare not hide it from you. Taoist master, I really find it hard to believe. The gap between the saint realm and the immortal realm, and even the gap between the 9th stage of the immortal realm, is almost infinite. It is impossible to overcome this infinite gap by relying on a road, no matter how you think about it," Luo Fan said. Frog at the bottom of a well. The old man smiled and commented on Luo Fan. Luo Fan was not angry. At his current realm, his Taoist heart had already reached an unshakable level. A little verbal attack could not affect him at all. Obviously, the old man did not want to see Luo Fan angry. This evaluation was obviously his real evaluation of Luo Fan. Therefore, after he finished speaking, he continued, "An ordinary road naturally cannot allow a Taoist master to overcome the infinite gap and become a saint realm. But what if this road is in the chaos?" In the chaos. Luo Fan's eyes lit up. If this road is in the chaos, then it seems possible. That seems to be a real possibility. He murmured as his eyes flashed crazily. Countless lights flashed in his mind and constantly changed. The state of chaos was a supreme existence that he could not understand at all. Although he could not understand the state of primal chaos, he knew that even a saint was an insignificant existence, even in the great Tianyuan world. Even in the great Tianyuan world, he was just an insignificant, not there, and could even be destroyed. It was easy to imagine just how profound and mighty this supreme existence was. If there was a road to the saint realm in any world, no matter what, Luo Fan would not believe it. But if the road to the saint realm appeared in the state of chaos, where anything could happen, it did not seem to be a fantasy. Yes, the beginning of the road to the saint realm is somewhere in the world, but the body of the road is completely in the state of chaos. Embarking on the road to the saint realm is equivalent to embarking on the road to understanding the chaos. As long as one can walk the road to the saint realm, it is equivalent to understanding the mystery of chaos enough to become a saint. Naturally, one can become a saint, Tao Master 5 Elements said with longing and sadness in his eyes. Luo Fan could completely understand his longing and sadness. Longing was the longing that every living creature, even the projection of power, had for the saint realm. But he was sad because he understood that he was just someone's projection, a shadow. Even if he seemed to have the divine power that surpassed the 9th stage of the immortal realm, it was just an illusion. He could never become a saint, and it was impossible for him to step into the saint realm. I wonder where the entrance to the road to the saint realm is. Please tell me, Tao Master. Luo Fan bowed to the ground and said, "A latecomer. I have already felt your sincerity. Unfortunately, you do not know where the entrance to the road to the saint realm is," the old man sighed. "May I ask why?" Luo Fan stood up and asked in shock. This old man was a projection of Tao Master 5 Elements, a shadow. The reason why Tao Master 5 Elements left him here was because he knew where the road to the saint realm was. Therefore, he planned on finding the opportunity to become a saint and left behind this inheritance. If that was the case, how could Tao Master 5 Elements not know where the road to the saint realm was? If he didn't know, how could he find the opportunity to become a saint? However, he naturally wouldn't think that the old man was lying to him. After all, it was meaningless. Therefore, he asked in shock and not in doubt. "I wonder if you have heard of this saying, if you don't become a Tao Master, it will be difficult to walk the saint realm?" The old man sighed. "I have not." Luo Fan frowned. What does that mean? It was indeed the first time that Luo Fan had heard of this saying. He had heard countless things about the great Tianyuan world from the human venerable, but the human venerable was only at the level of a disbanded celestial of the great all-embracing heaven. Although he was a disciple of a saint in the great Tianyuan world, he could barely be considered to have set foot in the upper echelons of the cultivation world, not even the top. Under such circumstances, it was naturally impossible for him to clearly know all the secrets of the great Tianyuan world. And Luo Fan had heard all kinds of things about the great Tianyuan world from the human venerable. Naturally, he didn't know the secrets that the human venerable didn't know. Oh, I almost forgot that you are only at the 7th stage of the celestial realm. In our time, only those who have surpassed the 9th stage of the celestial realm would know this, the old man said suddenly. Hearing this, Luo Fan could only nod at the side. How could he say anything else? The old man didn't wait for Luo Fan to reply and continued. Ordinary people only know that the celestial realm is divided into 9 stages, and at most they know that each stage is divided into 9 grades. But they don't know that above the 9 stages below the saint realm, there are still 5 stages. These 5 stages are perishing realm, understanding void, fusing path, transcendence, and town master. Among them, advancing each stage is more than 100 times more difficult than breaking through from the 1st stage of the celestial realm to the 9th stage of the celestial realm. Listening to the old man explain the stages after breaking through the 9th stage of the celestial realm, Luo Fan suddenly felt that a door leading to another world had opened in front of him. He had always felt that although the great Tianyuan world stages were divided into 9 stages and 9 grades of the celestial realm, compared to such a perfect world with such a long history, this kind of stage division was still a little crude, and it couldn't match this big world. Now that he heard about the stages above the 9th stage of the celestial realm, he suddenly felt that perhaps only by breaking through the 9th stage of the celestial realm could he be considered to have truly set foot on the path of Tao. And these 5 stages above the 9th stage of the celestial realm, each of them had only 2 words in their names, but they seemed to contain many mysteries of cultivation and many secrets of becoming a sage. In a trance, he felt that the heavy fog that had covered him seemed to show signs of dispersing. Chapter 794. No one knows where the path to sainthood came from. Perhaps it was built by the combined efforts of the sages, or perhaps it was built by the gods who created the world. In short, when any living being steps into the annihilation realm, they will naturally know of the holy road's existence. If one does not become a Tao master, it will be difficult to walk the holy road. The elder continued to explain. His eyes were filled with reminiscence. However, although one can know of the holy road's existence as long as one steps into the annihilation realm, no matter what one's identity is, one can only know where the entrance to the holy road is after becoming a Tao master. Without becoming a Tao master, even a disciple of a sage will not know where the entrance to the holy road is. When your excellency became a Tao master, you naturally knew the entrance to the path to sainthood. But your excellency was only the 833rd incarnation of your excellency. Even if your excellency's other memories are the same as your excellency's, you still don't know where the entrance to the path to sainthood is. Luo Fan heard the elder's words and felt a little regretful. A path that would allow one to comprehend the way of the sage and break through the shackles of the immortal realm to become a sage was something that he looked forward to and yearned for. How could he not feel regretful when he heard that he had to wait until he reached the 5th realm above the immortal realm? However, although it was regretful, he also knew that this was the only reasonable way. If such a mysterious path was known to all, how could a mortal master who was a disciple of a sage not know about it? How could he not know about it? Thank you for your explanation, Tao Master. Your words have really broadened my horizons. Luo Fan bowed to the elder and said. At this moment, there was a hint of understanding in his eyes. It was as if he had seen through many things that he could not see before. The elder seemed to have recovered from his emotions and said, "There is no need to be so polite. I am the projection of my body's inheritance, so I will naturally inherit my body's way. I will now pass on to you the way of the 5 elements that my body cultivates. If you are willing to cultivate the 833rd projection, you can cultivate it. If you're not willing to cultivate it, you can also gain some enlightenment. Luo Fan smiled and said, "Thank you, Tao Master. However, I do not know what request you have." As a cultivator, he had matured enough to embark on the path of becoming a sage. In order to break through to the sage realm, everything in the outside world besides the sage realm, even the rank 9 magic treasures, were meaningless to him. There wasn't much difference between them and nothingness. At least, if Luo Fan reached that realm, everything else would be the same for him. Under such circumstances, Tao Master 5 Element had left behind such a legacy. How could Luo Fan believe that this was the legacy of the cultivation method and the sect? Because of this, he wanted to know what Tao Master 5 Element needed the inheritor to do, which was why he had left the inheritance here. Is it that hard to guess what the body wants? Others might not be able to guess it, but can't you guess it as well? The old man didn't directly answer, and instead asked a question. I should know, Luo Fan muttered to himself. Within a few breaths, he came to a sudden realization. I see. Looks like I was thinking too much. I already know what the Tao Venerable wants. I will not let you down. After the realization, he smiled and said, through thinking, he thought about what would happen if he wanted to leave the inheritance in the same state as Tao Master 5 Element. With such a change in perspective, he naturally came to a sudden realization and knew what it was. If he had reached that realm, he would not care about anything else in the outside world, even if it was a rank 9 magic weapon. The only thing he would think about was breaking through the immortal realm and becoming a sage realm. Therefore, if he wanted to leave the inheritance, he would definitely do it to help him break through the immortal realm and become a sage realm. Guessing from this goal, the purpose of Tao Master 5 Elements inheritance was very obvious. It was nothing more than to let the successor obtain his inheritance and cultivate the supreme divine sense. Similarly, after becoming a Tao Master and stepping into the sage realm, he would be able to bring some help to himself. At least, they would have to support each other. In order to go further on the road to becoming a sage, there was such a possibility. It was quite difficult to say how likely this plan would succeed. After all, he did not know when the inheritance would be obtained, what kind of mentality the person would have, whether the person would become a Tao Master or embark on the road to becoming a sage. Even if the inheritance was obtained by someone else in a short period of time, the inheritor would be grateful and wholeheartedly help him. What's more, the inheritor would become a Tao Master and embark on the road to becoming a sage. In the end, the chances of meeting him on the road to becoming a sage were extremely slim. All of these uncertainties made the possibility of the plan succeeding almost minuscule, almost to the point that it was impossible to succeed. However, there was still a slight chance of success in theory. The road to becoming a sage was a road that had no end, a road that transcended the mortal world. Walking on such a road, any possible help could not be given up. If he gave up because he felt that the possibility of success was minuscule, wouldn't it be a waste if he failed because he lacked the slightest possibility of success? Wouldn't it be a waste if his hundreds of millions of years of bitter training turned to naught? It was precisely because of this that even if the possibility of success was slim, a wise cultivator would never give up. What's more, leaving behind an inheritance was nothing for a cultivator who was about to embark on the road to becoming a sage. Even leaving behind millions of inheritances was just a matter of a thought. How could a cultivator who was about to embark on the road to becoming a sage be stingy? Hearing Luo Fan's words, the old man laughed and said, "Latecomer, you are indeed smart. It seems that I can teach you the most essential way of cultivation." Luo Fan thought about it and understood many things that he had never thought about before. Tao Master 5 Elements was not without consideration. If he did not know the true meaning of a Tao Master and did not know why the inheritance was left here, it meant that even if he obtained the inheritance, it was unlikely that he would go to the road to becoming a sage to help Tao Master 5 Elements. In that case, he would definitely not be able to obtain the true inheritance of Tao Master 5 elements. Perhaps he would gain a lot, but it would be difficult to obtain the essence. This was not a complicated plan, but it gave Luo Fan a wake-up call. If he had such a plan, he would definitely be prepared for it. That was what he thought, but his face did not change much. The old man stopped laughing and did not do anything else. He said, "The Tao that the body cultivates is the Tao of the 5 elements. This Tao is extremely subtle. It reaches the origin of the world. If cultivated to the peak, it will be able to split open the chaos and recreate a world of the 5 elements. It is the supreme Tao of creation." Luo Fan's eyes lit up. Any cultivation method that could help one become a Tao master must be so subtle that it was unimaginable. The Tao of the 5 elements could allow Tao Master 5 elements to step into the realm of Tao Master. Finally embarking on the road to becoming a sage, there was naturally no need to say more about the profound mysteries. If you cannot see through the Tao Master's plan, he can only teach you the Tao of the heavens so that you can surpass the 9th stage of the immortal realm. In the end, the best-case scenario is to create a world that surpasses the vast 1,000 realms in the great Tianyuan world. He will not teach you the Tao of the beyond heavens so that you can recreate a world in the chaos, the old man said. Luo Fan did not feel relieved when he heard this. Instead, he was slightly puzzled. This method is separated into the heavens and the beyond heavens? In that case, the 5 elements world created in the chaos should be a perfect world. Since there is such a method, the Tao Master can cultivate it directly and create a world in the chaos. Why would he need to embark on the road to becoming a sage? He did not hide his doubts at all. He said it out loud as soon as he thought of it. "You are a newcomer. You think too simply. The Tao body of the 5 elements has been created long ago. It has even been perfected because it has seen many sage arts, but that is only a cultivation method. Creating a perfect cultivation method and actually cultivating it are 2 completely different realms." The old man chuckled. Luo Fan understood when he heard this. He had taken it for granted. Although the Tao of the 5 elements could create a foundation in the chaos and create a perfect world like when the great Tianyuan world was first created, it was not easy to reach that realm. However, it was absolutely not an easy task to reach that level, to truly attain that supreme divine ability, and to possess that unbelievable might. Pangu, who created the world, was so powerful. After he created the untainted world, he turned into all living things and completely integrated into the untainted world. The Tao of the 5 elements could create a perfect world in the chaos. The cultivator must at least be as powerful as Pangu, or even several times more powerful than Pangu. Otherwise, the Tao of the 5 elements would become a suicidal path. It was obvious that in order to cultivate Pangu's powerful divine ability at the immortal realm, one had to be extremely powerful. It was definitely something that was close to impossible. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to reach the peak of the way of the 5 elements, the way of the outer world, and finally be able to split the world in the state of chaos, directly comprehend the mysteries of indestructibility and immortality, and directly reach the saint realm. It was almost impossible. Therefore, if one wanted to cultivate such a method and reach the sage realm, he had to find another way. The way to become a sage was obviously that other way. After thinking this through, Luo Fan's expression was no longer doubtful. Instead, he came to a sudden realization. When the old man saw Luo Fan's expression, he seemed to be quite pleased. However, he didn't praise Luo Fan and continued, "The 5 elemental Taos within the Heavens method is a rank 1 cultivation method. Once you master it, you'll become a rank 1 immortal. At the peak, one can break through to the 9th stage of the immortal realm. The Tao of the Beyond Heaven is a cultivation method that surpasses the 1st grade. As long as one reaches the intermediate level, one can break through to the 9th stage of the immortal realm. If one can cultivate it to the profound level, it will be easy to become a Tao master. However, if you want to cultivate it to perfection and reach the peak, you'll need a supreme opportunity. Even the Creator doesn't know how it'll be possible to reach this step. A first-grade immortal was an immortal at every stage of the immortal realm. In other words, at the first stage of the immortal realm, one would be a first-grade immortal. A second-grade immortal would be a second-grade immortal, and so on. Each stage of the immortal realm was divided into 9 grades. Among them, the difference between the lower 3 grades and the middle 3 grades was like the difference between heaven and earth. Immortals in the middle 3 grades could definitely treat those in the lower 3 grades like ants. Similarly, immortals in the upper 3 grades could definitely crush those in the middle 3 grades like ants. From this, it could be seen that even the Tao of the 5 elements was a supreme cultivation method that could only exist under the sages in the great Tianyuan world. If such a cultivation method were to be thrown out, it would definitely cause a bloodbath. It could even cause the deaths of hundreds of millions of cultivators. It was obvious that the Tao of the 5 elements had been thrown out by the Tao Master of the 5 elements as a pretense to fool the living beings who did not know the cultivation method he had left behind to pass on the gist of trueness. From this, it could be seen how mysterious the even more precious Tao of the beyond heaven was. The old man did not wait for Luo Fan to think too much. He immediately began to talk incessantly and eloquently. The void was formed by the old man's thoughts. Everything changed according to the old man's thoughts. The stars rotated, the void changed, and all living things were born and destroyed. Everything was under the old man's control. As a result, as the old man continued to speak, the entire void began to change crazily. Countless wondrous sceneries continuously appeared around Luo Fan and the old man, and then continuously disappeared. It was as if hundreds of millions of worlds were being born and destroyed around them. The language the old man used was an extremely ancient one. This language was very different from the language of the great Tianyuan world. It looked even more ancient and complicated. At the same time, it was more mysterious. The old man had existed here for hundreds of trillions of years. This meant that the Tao Master of the 5 elements had existed for hundreds of trillions of years. For the great Tianyuan world, hundreds of trillions of years were just a moment. However, for all living things in the great Tianyuan world, this period of time was long enough. In such a long period of time, the entire great Tianyuan world would naturally undergo many changes. It was only natural for languages to change. In Luo Fan's previous life, Huaxia had only developed from knots to modern civilization in just a few thousand years. One could imagine how powerful the changes that the light of hundreds of trillions of years had on the evolution of civilization were. Even if there were hundreds of saints in the great Tianyuan world, it was impossible for everything to remain the same. At Luo Fan's level, differences in languages could no longer be a barrier to communication. Therefore, even though this was the first time he had heard of these words, he could easily understand the true meaning behind them. He could also easily understand the true meaning within, and could even hear the various thoughts and emotions of Tao Master 5 Element when he created these techniques and wrote these words. This ability naturally allowed him to have an unimaginable understanding of the words spoken by the old man. It was even to the extent that after the elder finished speaking, he already understood the profundities of the technique and completely comprehended all of the mysteries within it. The content of the old man's speech was not the outer sky technique of the 5 elements, but the inner sky technique. In fact, the inner sky technique could be said to be the foundation of the 5 elements Tao. Although the outer sky technique was mysterious and unpredictable, it was rooted in the inner sky technique. If one could not completely understand the inner sky technique, the outer sky technique would be like water without a source, a tree without roots. It would be impossible to cultivate it. The Tao of the 5 elements did not just contain a single cultivation method. Even the inner sky technique was formed by the combination of countless techniques. It was not just some kind of power manipulation technique, state of mind, or technique. Therefore, to explain the inner sky technique clearly was not something that could be done in a few words. The old man's speech took a full 3 years before he managed to explain the inner sky technique to Luo Fan. During these 3 years, Luo Fan spent every moment comprehending the countless techniques and mysteries of the 5 elements. In the Tao Master of the Five Elements view of the world, the origin of the world was the five elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Everything else was born from the combination of the five elements. Even yin, yang, and chaos were formed by the combination of the five elements in a specific way. As long as one understood the mysteries of the five elements, one could split the sky and earth, create all things, and be omnipotent. On the surface, this view of the world seemed simple and crude to the point of rudeness. But the internal changes were unimaginably complicated. How did the five elements construct the great heaven primordial world? How did the five elements construct yin and yang? How did they construct all living things? How did they construct space? How did they construct time? All of these were described in great detail. It could be said that according to the inner sky technique, almost everything in the great Tianyuan world could be described clearly. Moreover, there was no contradiction between them. Even Luo Fan felt that the world might really be formed by the circulation of the five elements. However, Luo Fan had, after all, dominated the earth, the untainted land, and the great Tianyuan world, the three supreme places that had gathered countless times. He had a deep-rooted understanding of the world, chaos, and space-time. Even if the Tao of the five elements and the inner sky technique could explain almost everything, it could not change his deep-rooted understanding. It could not change his view of chaos, his perception of the world, and space-time. The inner sky technique is so perfect. No wonder it could create a near-perfect world in the great Tianyuan world that surpassed the vast thousand worlds. However, there must be some limitations and some key weaknesses. Otherwise, there would not be the outer sky technique, and it would not be able to create a near-perfect world. Luo Fan's mind was very clear. Even though the inner sky technique was like a gem, and almost every word and tone contained infinite truths, he was not truly lost in it. Instead, he calmly weighed the techniques and evaluated the inner sky technique. Chapter 795. After the old man spent 3 years explaining the Tao of the five elements and the laws of the heavens, he did not stop. Instead, he continued to explain the laws of the heavens. First published, the outer world method was based on the inner world method. One must have a deep understanding of the inner world method in order to understand a little bit. Only then could one truly understand the mysteries of the method and understand its true meaning. The art of the heavens was to use countless techniques to explain everything in the world using the five elements and make it real. However, the art of beyond the heavens was different. Even though it was still the way of the five elements, it had transcended the ordinary five elements. Instead, it expanded the five elements to include everything that contained the gold element, wood element, water element, fire element, and earth element. This change in concept instantly increased the scope of the five elements by countless times. For example, time was an existence that could only be transformed into the five elements after millions and millions of times of decomposition. In this expanded concept, because 100 years could not be cut off and possessed the characteristics of an almost irresistible flow, it was treated as an existence of water and was divided into water. Like time, other beings were classified in a similar way. With such an expansion, the other heaven method could divide all the tangible and intangible existences in the world into the five elements without any steps. As a result, the adaptability of the five elements skyrocketed by who knew how many times. After understanding the basic concept of extraterrestrial methods, Luo Fan's eyes lit up like two suns. There was only an indescribable shock in his heart. If it could be said that the art of heaven regarded everything in the world as a combination of the five elements, it was a crude view of the world. But after the five elements were expanded into the five elements, this view of the world became incomparably grand, rising to a level that Luo Fan could not imagine. In this view of the world, the appearance of everything had turned into illusions and remained. There was only the truth hidden under the various appearances. Such a worldview was something that Luo Fan could not achieve. It was also something that he had never thought of before. Even if he had the ability to see through the surface of all things and see through the truth of all things. The world that he saw in his eyes was at most more things that ordinary cultivators could not see. Although he could see through many illusions, they were still hidden by the layers of appearances. The truth of the world was still hidden in the layers of fog. If he wanted to see through this fog, he would still need to expend an endless amount of energy and use all kinds of divine abilities to illuminate it. Once the old man entered the process of explaining the extraterrestrial method, he would be completely focused, completely ignoring all the changes in the outside world. He didn't even pay attention to Luo Fan's various reactions. The words that came out of his mouth were just ordinary ancient characters, even though they were complex and profound. However, it was still something that all cultivators could easily understand. However, when these words were gathered together and formed sentences, all sorts of inconceivable changes occurred. Every word became profound and unfathomable. Every word seemed to contain the deepest secrets of the universe, secrets that should not be expressed in words. As he spoke, the space and time around Luo Fan and the old man completely collapsed, turning into a strange existence that could cover all light and images. Time, space, matter, and energy seemed to exist in this strange existence, yet they also seemed to not exist. The surroundings seemed to have become boundless, yet it also seemed like there was no gap that could accommodate any matter or energy that surpassed the two of them. Everything seemed to have returned to a state of chaos. The state of chaos kept surging and changing, as if it was brewing something. Countless incredible changes could be seen with the naked eye. However, no matter how much it changed, no matter how the state of chaos surged, it was still just a state of chaos. It was still a state of time, space, matter, and energy mixed together. The method of the extraterrestrial method was more than 10,000 times more complicated than the method of the heavens. However, they were all descriptions of concepts, ideas, and worldviews. The actual cultivation method was countless times fewer than the method of the heavens. There were only a few dozen of them. Under such circumstances, the old man only talked about the method of the extraterrestrial method, which was more than 10,000 times more complicated than the method of the heavens, for nearly a year. It was even less than 2/3 of the 3 years that the method of the heavens had taken. After a year, the old man explained the various aspects of the method of the extraterrestrial method, and the state of chaos around Luo Fan and the old man began to gradually calm down. A boundless starry sky appeared around them. The two of them sat on the praying mats like two gods of creation sitting in the starry sky of the universe. They naturally exuded a desolate and majestic aura. After the old man stopped speaking, he looked extremely tired, and his face was also slightly pale. It seemed that this kind of narration was also a great burden to him. After listening to the old man's narration, Luo Fan had already closed his eyes. The light of wisdom in his mind flickered wildly as he continuously comprehended the two methods of the Tao of the 5 elements, the Tao of the heavens, the Tao of the 5 elements. The Tao of the 5 elements was a direct path to becoming a sage. This Tao was so complicated that it was the first time that Luo Fan had seen it in the countless years he had cultivated. There were numerous techniques involved, and almost every single one of them could be said to be a technique that many cultivators in the world dreamed of obtaining. Every single one of them was enough for an ordinary cultivator to spend their entire life's effort on. More importantly, although these techniques were numerous, every single one of them was extremely important. Every single one of them was an indispensable part of the Tao of the 5 elements. If any of them were missing, it would cause the Tao to be incomplete. In the end, the cultivator who cultivated this Tao would lose the possibility of becoming a saint through this Tao. Between any two techniques, there would be some kind of extremely subtle, complementary relationship. This was especially true for the method of the heavens. The number of methods involved in the method of the heavens was tens of thousands of times more than the method of the heavens, and there was no division of priority. In other words, if one cultivated the method of the heavens, they could start with any method. After that, With every additional cultivation method that was cultivated, the power of the previous cultivation method would increase tremendously. When all the cultivation methods that were related to the art of heaven were cultivated, the art of heaven would be cultivated completely, and one would obtain supreme divine might, reaching the supreme realm that surpassed the ninth level of the immortal realm. Although each method of the heavens was closely related to the method of the heavens, it was above the method of the heavens. However, it was above the many cultivation methods that surpassed the methods within the heavens. It used the many cultivation methods in the world as a foundation. It stepped on the many cultivation methods in the world and rose to an unimaginable height. The reason why the loss of any method of the heavens would cause unpredictable consequences was because the loss of any method would cause the foundation of the method of the heavens to be lost. Obviously, without a stable foundation, how could one seek Tao? How could one become a sage? The numerous methods of the heavens kept flowing in Luo Fan's mind. They were scattered by the infinite light of wisdom in his mind, and the gist of truth was extracted bit by bit. This process was obviously not an easy one. The Tao Master of 5 elements was the last realm of the 5 realms beyond the 9th rank of the celestial realm. He had even stepped into the inner part of the road to becoming a sage and was very likely to be breaking through to the sage realm. The inheritance left by such an existence must have been polished for countless years. After countless refinements, he must have clearly described the quintessence of the 5 elements way. If he wanted to take out the quintessence of the 5 elements way in words that were clearly described by the existence of the Tao Master realm, the difficulty could be imagined. In the process of Luo Fan constantly extracting the gist of truth of 5 elements, 100 years passed in a flash. During these 100 years, his body had always been sitting cross-legged on the rank 7 magic treasure without moving at all, as if it was a body that had lost all vitality. And that was an illusory door. It had always been in front of him, motionless, as if it had been there since ancient times. And that bit of will of his, it was in that door, sitting in front of the projection of the Tao Master of 5 elements, eyes closed, motionless like a dead thing. As for Tao Master 5 elements, he was also sitting cross-legged in front of Luo Fan's mind. However, his eyes were not closed. Instead, they seemed to be able to see through time and space, penetrating the void and illuminating an unknown place. He looked a little confused. For him, who had existed for billions of years, what was the difference between 100 years and the blink of an eye? Besides, he had been alone for such a long time, so he naturally had his own way of killing time. Naturally, he would not change because of waiting for 100 years. With this, Luo Fan's mind moved. Suddenly, he slowly opened his eyes and said, "It seems that the true inheritor of the Tao Master has appeared. I have to leave now." The light in the elder's eyes condensed, and he smiled. "I didn't expect that no living being would come here for billions of years. Now, in a mere 100 years, living beings have come to meet the Tao Master. How delightful! Latecomer, you have now received all of the Tao Master's inheritance. It is a pity that you are unwilling to accept the inheritance and become his disciple. Many of the treasures left by the Tao Master are not suitable for you. It is useless for you to stay here. Go." Luo Fan bowed and said, "Thank you for the Tao Master's teachings. If I have the time to step on the path of sainthood, I will try my best to find the Tao Master's body. Go, go." The elder smiled. With that, he waved his hand, and the surrounding time and space changed. He gradually disappeared in front of Luo Fan. However, Luo Fan's will was slightly shaken, and in a trance, time and space changed. He had already left that time and space, and once again arrived in front of his body. The illusory door that had appeared in front of him for 100 years had disappeared without a trace. It was as if it had never been there. Luo Fan's corporeal body slowly opened its eyes and faintly smiled. With a thought, that bit of consciousness returned to his body and completely merged with his mind. Although it seemed that his consciousness had been completely separated from his body in the past 100 years, as if he had experienced something completely different, in reality, everything that his consciousness had experienced was directly transmitted to his body without any delay. The comprehension of his consciousness over the past 100 years was equivalent to his comprehension of his body. There was not much difference between them. Under such circumstances, there was naturally no need for any memory transfer when his consciousness returned to his body. It was natural and calm, as if he was retrieving an ordinary consciousness. After Luo Fan retracted his thoughts, the void not far away slightly distorted, and a little illusory shadow slowly materialized. Looking at the figure, it was one of the rulers of the 9 major forces. Obviously, in the past 100 years, one of the Bloodwood King and the others had finally passed the numerous tests and arrived at the body of the magic treasure to accept the inheritance. However, this person was not the strongest among the 9 rulers, the Bloodwood monarch. Instead, she was a very ordinary female stage 6 immortal realm cultivator who did not seem to be anything special. Luo Fan did not want to face this woman, and his heart moved. His figure naturally disappeared just as the woman was about to completely appear. He didn't want to face the woman, not because he was afraid of the Bloodwood King and the others, but because he felt that he had already obtained the benefits he wanted. If he faced them, it would only cause more trouble. He wouldn't be able to obtain more benefits, nor would he be able to obtain much pleasure from victory. Naturally, he did not want to cause trouble for himself. After a while, the void shook again, and another illusory door appeared in front of the woman. This door was very familiar to Luo Fan. It was the door that had appeared in front of him for 100 years. It was the entrance to the illusory world created by the projection of Tao Master 5 elements. Luo Fan could not help smiling when he saw this. He knew that he had entered the official process of inheritance. He did not want to stay here any longer. With a thought, he was about to leave. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded in his ear. There are more than 10 Tao Masters' inheritance treasures in the chaotic Tao realm here. They are the inheritances left by the Tao Masters who went to the path of sainthood with me. Since you're interested in finding your own Tao, you can go and find them. They will be of great help to you. Thank you for waking up, Tao Master. Hearing this, Luo Fan knew that this was the projection of Tao Master 5 elements giving him guidance. His eyes lit up, and he bowed to the light door. Then, he did not hesitate. With a thought, he took a step forward and directly crossed thousands of miles. He appeared outside the colorful light layer around the magic treasure. 100 years ago, he had needed to use the spiritual guide to create a passage to pass through the colorful light layer. However, after 100 years of understanding the Tao of the 5 elements, although he did not directly cultivate it, he had a preliminary understanding of the Tao of the 5 elements through understanding. The colorful light was formed from the 5 elements and happened to be within the scope of his understanding. As a result, he had gained a deeper understanding of the characteristics of the 5-colored light over the past 100 years. As such, he was able to move through the void without touching the 5-colored light and appear outside the range of the magic treasure. With this kind of performance, it meant that his understanding of the Tao of the 5 elements had increased several times compared to 100 years ago. Maybe I should stay in the chaotic Tao realm for a long time, Luo Fan thought as he looked at the colorful planet in front of him. Although 100 years of understanding had deepened his understanding of the Tao of the 5 elements by several times, the process of extracting the true meaning of the countless methods in the world was very slow. Although it could not be said that he had gained nothing, he could not achieve the goal he wanted to achieve. This speed of comprehension made him realize that if he wanted to extract the profundities that he needed and could help him create the method, it would take a long time before he could do so. It was because of this understanding that he decided to stay in the chaotic Tao realm. In any case, any place in the great Tianyuan world made no difference to him. Although the immemorial Tao realm was only a Tao realm in a relatively dull eternal forest in the great Tianyuan world, since the environment was suitable for his cultivation, he would not have any psychological barriers because of it. As for Bai Yuan, Feng Ling, and the others who were in the world in the sleeve, he had long forgotten about them. Bai Yuan was just his slave, while Feng Ling and the others were his magic treasures. He was obviously not the kind of person who would make a stupid decision to leave a place that was beneficial to his cultivation for the sake of his slaves and magic treasures. Therefore, while he was thinking about whether to stay or leave, he did not think about the situation of Bai Yuan and the others lying in his world in the sleeve at all. After making his decision, he released his perception and scanned in all directions, carefully sensing his surroundings. Soon, he found a place that was suitable for his cultivation. His body moved, turning into an invisible escape light and flying in the direction he had chosen. During this process, he did not forget to hide his body. It must be known that Bloodwood King and the others had not given up on finding trouble with him. If they found out where he was, although his life would not be in danger, his cultivation process might be interrupted. This was not what he wanted. Anyway, it was not difficult to hide his body, and he did not mind that this seemingly timid action was a little embarrassing, so he naturally did it. Of course, at this moment, Bloodwood King and the others were working hard to find clues to the inheritance and accept the test of the inheritance. Although it had been more than 100 years since they entered the colorful brilliance to accept the test, the complexity and difficulty of the inheritance test made it so that they still could not see any signs of success. They could only work hard to find clues to complete the test and put all their efforts into the test of Tao Master 5 elements. Under such circumstances, there was naturally no one among them who would pay attention to what was happening outside the colorful brilliance. Luo Fan's cautiousness, on the other hand, was just a show for the blind to see. Chapter 796. Luo Fan flew at an extremely fast speed. In just a few breaths, he had flown hundreds of thousands of miles and arrived at a place that was rather special in the realm of immemorial Tao. Text first. Although this place was still a gray and hazy void, there was a faint sign of the void sinking in. This kind of sinking made this place seem like a perceptual trap, making it difficult for all living beings to sense what was happening inside. Even Luo Fan had only discovered the existence of such a mysterious place through his perception of his surroundings. Although this place blocked out perception, it could not block out power. Luo Fan covered the place with his power and instantly scanned the inside and outside of that place. Just as he had guessed, there was nothing inside this place. It was just that the void had sunk in, but there was no trace of other matter, and there was no power playing any role in it. After figuring this out, he naturally did not hesitate and stepped into the place. He raised his hand and pointed. From his heaven and earth sleeve, he took out a simple ritual implement that he had bought from the 10,000 Weapon Pavilion. This magic tool didn't seem to have been refined using a restriction tool refinement method, but its power was only equivalent to a magic tool refined using a restriction tool refinement method with a dozen or so restrictions. But it was not very precious. Its power was also only average. However, its average power was quite useful at this moment. This was because its power was to open up a manor inside that could accommodate hundreds of people. With a ritual implement, it was convenient to live in, and this was what Luo Fan needed the most at this time. The ritual implement looked like a small pavilion. It was only the size of a human head, and it floated in the air. It was extremely inconspicuous in the entire realm of immemorial Tao. It was extremely difficult to find such a ritual implement in the vast realm of immemorial Tao. However, Luo Fan did not give up on hiding this ritual implement just because it was so small and difficult to find. With a thought, he sent countless lines into this ritual implement. In an instant, the ritual implement shone, and its power increased greatly. This kind of increase was not because of the increase in the number of rooms inside, but because the concealment ability of this artifact could only increase by 1,000 times. In an instant, it completely blended into the void. Unless there was someone more powerful than Luo Fan who had the heart to look for him. Otherwise, it would be extremely difficult to detect its existence. After doing all that, Luo Fan stepped into the magic treasure and directly chose a room to sit in. He closed his eyes and began to continue the process of the past 100 years, sorting out and comprehending the true meaning of the 5 elemental Taos and the countless techniques within the heavens. Sorting out the true meaning of the five elemental Taos was naturally much easier than creating such a cultivation method in the past. Even if this technique was perfect and almost impossible to change, it was not impossible to extract its true meaning under the condition that it was not complete. Therefore, although Luo Fan's sorting and retrieving process was slow, it was still progressing. Every bit of progress allowed him to have a deeper understanding of the way of the five elements and the mysteries of the great way of Tianyuan. It allowed him to further improve his understanding of his own cultivation method. In a trance, he felt that the cultivation method that was brewing in his mind was moving in a more and more complete direction. However, this kind of progress was not without its drawbacks. After all, the way of the five elements was broad and profound. It had almost formed a perfect worldview and could almost perfectly explain everything in the great way of Tianyuan. Under these circumstances, it was impossible for Luo Fan to not be affected at all. The direction he was moving in was unknowingly getting closer to the way of the five elements. This kind of change was naturally not what Luo Fan wanted to see. Therefore, although he was constantly brewing his own cultivation method, he did not immediately start creating it. Instead, he compared it with the endless memories he brought from his body and continuously removed the one-sided influence of the way of the five elements. He worked hard to make it pure and refined. This process was not easy, and the time it took was not short. In this trance of taking, removing, refining, and purifying, time passed by leisurely. In a trance, 2,000 years had passed. After 2,000 years, Luo Fan, who was in the magic tool, opened his eyes, which had been closed for 2,000 years. There was a faint, pure brilliance flashing in his eyes. Although I have gained something, I can only upgrade myself to the second level. Although I have surpassed the disbanded celestial of the great all-embracing heaven, it is still not the disbanded way of the great all-embracing heaven. What a pity! Luo Fan sensed his own body and could not help but sigh slightly. At this moment, his cultivation method had not been created. It was only because he had taken the true meaning of the way of the sky and integrated the mysteries contained in it into his own spirit that he had naturally comprehended many of the mysteries of the great way of Tianyuan. And comprehending these mysteries naturally made his body, his strength, and his spirit change. Although it did not make him break through to the next level, it improved his quality. It made his spirit, his strength, and his body more and more compatible with the great way of Tianyuan. This kind of compatibility naturally caused his grade to rise. Before this, he had only cultivated the two cultivation methods to change his body and the quality of his life, but he had already pushed his grade to the peak of the middle 3 grades, which was the peak of the 4th grade. Now that his grade rose again, he naturally broke through the upper 3 grades and became a 2nd grade 7th stage immortal. In the great way of Tianyuan, apart from those who had great luck and wisdom, only those who were disciples of saints could achieve this grade. At this moment, Luo Fan did not even have a cultivation method, but he had already achieved this grade. This was enough to show how extraordinary he was. As for the Tao of the 5 elements within the heavens, it had been completely destroyed by him over the past 2,000 years. The boundaries of the countless cultivation methods were completely blurred by him. Every single cultivation method had become fragmented. The countless cultivation methods that were similar, the fragments that described the same true meaning, or the fragments that could be combined into the same type of true meaning, were all fused together. This formed an extremely chaotic mess. Almost any living being who saw it would feel that it had become a complete mess of nonsense. If a cultivator obtained these words, to cultivate, let alone cultivating a peerless ability, their soul might die and their consciousness might collapse as soon as they started cultivating. However, it was precisely because of this mess that the perfect system was broken. The true meaning was no longer inseparable from the cultivation method, and the truth was no longer hidden in the profound methods. This allowed Luo Fan to better organize and obtain the true meaning contained within the way of the heaven. It's a pity that the way of the heaven is too profound. It's too perfect. Even with my current knowledge, it's difficult for me to scatter it. Even the slightest bit of comprehension will affect me, making it difficult for me to control myself. Now is not the time to comprehend its profundities. Luo Fan sighed softly and stood up. His current body was flawless. No matter how long he sat, even if it was for billions of years, his body would not feel the slightest bit of obstruction. When he stood up, there would naturally not be any sound of bones stretching. As such, it was as if he had just sat down. However, it was as if he had just sat down, unlike an existence that had been sitting cross-legged for 2,000 years. After standing up, he took a step forward and appeared outside the ritual implement. With a wave of his hand, the ritual implement was put into his heaven and earth in his sleeve. Looking around, his surroundings were no different from 2,000 years ago. It was as if time had completely stopped here, as if the past 2,000 years had not passed at all. Tao Master 5 Element said that there are many inheritances here. I wonder where they are. Luo Fan looked around, and such a thought flashed through his mind. Tao Master 5 Element's way of the 5 elements had already given him so many benefits. The inheritances of the other Tao Masters would definitely not be too weak. If he could compare the same inheritance with the Tao of the 5 elements, he might be able to organize the way of the heaven and earth of the 5 elements and extract the true meaning. By then, his understanding of the great Tianyuan world would definitely increase by a shocking amount. Perhaps at that time, he would be able to easily create his own cultivation method. Under such circumstances, he naturally would not let go of the inheritance of the other Tao Masters. The chaotic essence Tao realm was vast and boundless, but it was only a Tao realm after all. At most, it was a bit more advanced than the boundless world. It was countless times worse than a perfect world like the untainted land, let alone the great Tianyuan world. Therefore, even if there were no clues with Luo Fan's ability, it wasn't too difficult to find other inheritances. With a slight thought, the power in his body shook and gathered towards his eyes. In an instant, hundreds of millions of formations were constructed in his eyes, densely packed together. If they were spread out, there would not be any gaps in the space of billions of miles. It would be completely filled by the power lines that were like spider silk. With this change, the entire chaotic essence Tao realm instantly changed in Luo Fan's eyes. The originally gray space of nothingness turned transparent in the blink of an eye. The auras that were extremely far away in the Tao realm were instantly pulled in front of him, allowing him to directly see the existence of a different aura in that location. Those inheritances were left in the chaotic essence Tao realm by the Tao Masters. They were passed down the cultivation of the Tao Masters throughout their lives, so that they could nurture cultivators that might be of help to them. Naturally, it was impossible for them to completely lead into the void without the slightest aura leaking out and not be detected by any cultivator. Under such circumstances, any location with an inheritance would definitely have a different aura from other locations. This gave Luo Fan the possibility of discovering the location of these inheritances. Of course, the difference in auras would definitely be extremely subtle and obscure. He would only be able to detect it when he was close. Otherwise, why would it be hidden in the Tao realm? How would it be possible to select the cultivators that were truly suitable for the inheritance? According to the original situation, even with Luo Fan's ability, he would have to be quite close to these places of inheritance in order to be able to sense these places of inheritance. Although this distance might be tens of thousands of times greater than that of ordinary cultivators, he still had to get close after all. However, during the process of sorting out the true meaning of the 5 elements Tao within the heavens over the past 2,000 years, he had combined those true meanings with his own power to create some rather mysterious magic skills that did not involve fundamental cultivation methods. At this moment, he was using an aura-gazing technique that he had passed down over the past 2,000 years. This method was naturally different from the crude methods of looking at feng shui in the mortal world. Instead, it was a mysterious method that could ignore distance, strength, and all other factors to directly see the aura that he wanted to see. Of course, although it could ignore distance, there was a certain limit to it. It was limited by one's cultivation level. If he was in the Tao realm, which was a bit stronger than the boundless thousand worlds, he would naturally be able to ignore distance without much effort. However, if this Tao realm grew into a perfect world, it did not need to be too strong. For example, if it grew to the level of the current primordial world, then he would need to spend tens of thousands of years of cultivation to be able to ignore distance. And if he went one step further, for example, in the great Tianyuan world, unless Luo Fan was hundreds of billions of times stronger than he was now, he would probably not be able to see through an entire continent, let alone ignore distance. He carefully comprehended the auras that were distributed throughout the chaotic essence Tao realm. Luo Fan quickly discovered where the magic treasure left behind by Tao Master 5 Elements was. He could even vaguely guess that the magic treasure was undergoing a drastic change at this moment. Either the person receiving the inheritance had reached the final stage, or the projection of Tao Master 5 Elements was displaying some kind of magic. After thinking for a while, Luo Fan let go of this and began to comprehend other auras, including the inheritance left behind by Tao Master 5 Elements. There were a total of 19 inheritances that existed throughout the chaotic essence Tao realm. There was nothing else in the entire chaotic essence Tao realm except for these 19 inheritances. It was as if the entire chaotic essence Tao realm was specifically built to accommodate these 19 inheritances. Judging from the auras, the 19 inheritances that contained them should all be magic treasures. There were strong and weak magic treasures among these magic treasures, but even the weakest was at the level of a 7th grade magic treasure. The strong ones even emitted an indescribable pressure that enveloped Luo Fan's divine soul as soon as he sensed the aura. Unless it was a 9th grade magic treasure, it was impossible for him to feel such a feeling. As for 9th grade magic treasures, they were not limited by the body. At the very least, they could exert power that surpassed the 9th stage of the immortal realm. Perhaps they could not reach the level of the annihilation realm, but they would definitely have no problem crushing the 9th stage of the immortal realm. The 7th, 8th, and 9th stages of the immortal realm were the upper 3 stages of the immortal realm. In the primordial world, there were the 3 stages of the zenith heaven realm. Existences at this level, even if they were magic treasures that did not have true intelligence in the great Tianyuan world, must be extremely incredible existences. When Luo Fan saw their auras through the Qi gazing technique, those magic treasures seemed to have sensed it. For a moment, the 2 different attitudes were sensed by Luo Fan through the changes in their auras. Among them, nearly 10 magic treasures emitted a sense of rejection, while the remaining 9, including the magic treasure left by Tao Master 5 Elements, emitted a sense of welcome. Obviously, this represented the attitude of these magic treasures towards him and their rejection towards him. This also meant that if he were to go to the inheritances, he might encounter treatment. In an instant, Luo Fan gave up on the idea of going to the places where the magic treasures emitted a sense of rejection. The magic treasures that emitted a sense of rejection did not have a specific level restriction. There were 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade magic treasures. Among them, 7th grade magic treasures were still manageable. He was still confident that he could escape from them, but 8th grade and 9th grade magic treasures were existences that were difficult for him to resist. Unless he could recover the supreme power of his body, if these magic treasures wanted to deal with him, he might not even be able to escape. Moreover, the most important thing was, since these magic treasures emitted an aura that repelled him, it would be difficult for him to gain the approval of these magic treasures if he was unwilling to really worship the masters of these magic treasures. It was even more impossible for them to be like the projection of Tao Master 5 Elements, who would unreservedly pass on the inheritance to him. In this way, going to these magic treasures that rejected him was unlikely to gain any benefits, but he might encounter great danger. How could he choose such a stupid choice? After secretly weighing it, Luo Fan finally made a decision. He chose a 7th grade magic treasure that did not reject him, and his figure turned into a conveyance light and flew away. Although there were magic treasures of the 7th, 8th, and ninth grade among the magic treasures that welcomed him, it seemed that the better choice was to go to the ninth grade magic treasure. After all, the inheritance in the ninth grade magic treasure might be more powerful than the inheritance in the 7th grade and 8th grade magic treasures. However, at this time, Luo Fan was only a 2nd grade, 7th grade immortal. He was not even a Daluo Loose Dao. If the 7th grade magic treasure wanted to deal with him, he might be able to escape, but if the 8th grade and ninth grade magic treasures wanted to harm him, he would be completely helpless. Although these magic treasures were exuding an intention to welcome him at this time, who knew what the truth was. If something went wrong, he might still have a chance to escape if he chose the 7th grade magic treasure. It was precisely because of this that he chose the 7th grade magic treasure that seemed to be the weakest. His speed was extremely fast, and the 7th grade magic treasure was only a few 100 million miles away from him. In a short while, he crossed a considerable distance and came to where the magic treasure was. Unlike the magic treasure left by Dao Master 5 Elements, this magic treasure was in the shape of a mirror. However, it was not an ordinary mirror, but a mirror with a diameter of thousands of miles. The mirror was gray in color, and it was no different from the gray void around it. Furthermore, it was lying flat, and if one were to look at it from afar, it was very likely that they would miss it if they didn't pay attention to it. The back of this mirror was flat, with only strands of simple lines. It seemed to outline something, but it was not completely outlined, looking extremely simple and extremely chaotic. On the front of the mirror, an extremely mysterious and incredible picture was being displayed. It was not anything else but a world, a time and space. To be continued. Chapter 797. On the front of the mirror, there was actually a world in the form of a plane. Text first. The world in the mirror seemed to be infinitely vast. There were mountains and rivers, plains and hills, and countless living beings. He could even faintly find traces of cultivators living here. Looking at this world, Luo Fan was not too surprised. In the primordial world, a level 7 magic treasure was already at the level of a great overarching heavenly treasure. Its power had reached an indescribable level. Opening a world inside, it was a small matter. However, even though he was not surprised by the world in the mirror, he could not help but admire the ingenuity of the person who refined this magic treasure. After all, it was not difficult for the 836 Taoist to open up a world, but the form this world existed and was a test of the creator's ability to create. If this magic treasure had opened up a world inside, Luo Fan would not have been too surprised. However, this world had fused with the surface of the mirror and existed in a two-dimensional way. This was the first time he had seen it, so he naturally felt that it was an eye-opener. Arriving here, the aura of this magic treasure became even more obvious to Luo Fan. The welcoming feeling in the aura also became more intuitive and stronger. Luo Fan carefully sensed the aura of this magic treasure, and he could not help but frown. This was because he could sense traces left behind by other living beings in the aura of this magic treasure. These traces were faintly discernible. If he was not careful, he could ignore them. However, in Luo Fan's senses, these auras were extremely obvious, allowing him to instantly sense the authenticity of these traces. He knew how long these traces had been left behind. These traces were formed by at least tens of thousands of cultivators entering the world on the surface of this magic treasure. And the closest trace to this one is at most less than 1,000,000 years old. Luo Fan's mind moved slightly, and he had already analyzed a lot of things from the 836 mark of the Tao disciple. The legacy magic treasure left behind by Tao Master 5 Elements hasn't been set foot in for billions of years. Why is this magic treasure like a public toilet? It's almost as if people come in and out. He was puzzled, but he stopped himself from immediately stepping into the magic treasure. It seems that the inheritance here is not so easy to obtain. He had already understood this fact. This conclusion was not difficult to reach. This magic treasure had traces of tens of thousands of cultivators entering and leaving here. Obviously, although there were tens of thousands of living beings who came here to accept the inheritance test, none of them had truly obtained all the inheritance. Collect this magic treasure. How could he not know this fact? Under his vigilance, he released his perception and began to sense this magic treasure in the most detailed way. He began to comprehend the structure and power of this magic treasure. With Luo Fan's current cultivation realm of the second stage, seventh stage immortal realm, the strength of his perception ability had long reached an unimaginable level. Under this kind of situation, he gradually comprehended some of the mysteries of this magic treasure. This magic treasure was a rank 7 magic treasure. This was naturally not fake. However, this rank 7 magic treasure was not an ordinary rank 7 magic treasure, but one with rank 8 materials. The refining method was enough to make it a rank 7 magic treasure. The reason why it was only a rank 7 magic treasure was because it was sealed by a powerful force and suppressed by a powerful existence. Understanding this, Luo Fan couldn't help but frown. In his heart, he had the thought of leaving this place and heading to another inheritance. However, this thought only flashed by. However, he knew that even the other legacy treasures would not be as simple as this enchanted treasure. If he left because this enchanted treasure hid a power that surpassed what he had sensed before, then he might have to leave all of these legacies. He would not dare to enter any of them. Because of this consideration, the thought of leaving was extinguished by him before it could truly form. Fine. Before the seal is undone, this magic treasure can only unleash the power of rank 7, but it's not fatal. Luo Fan sighed. He took a step and came to the front of the mirror, slowly descending. The moment his feet touched the front of the mirror, he suddenly felt an indescribable power pass through his body from the point of contact. In an instant, he felt that time and space had changed, and his body had appeared in another world. He looked around. It was the world he saw in the mirror, and the place he was standing on was the mountain peak he had chosen to land on in the mirror. This mountain was not very tall in the Great Tianyuan world or even the Untainted world. It was only a few 100,000 feet high, but in this mirror world, it was almost the highest mountain in the entire world. Looking around, it seemed as though the entire world was within his field of vision. There was an endless expanse of land, an endless sky, an endless number of mountains, and an endless amount of vitality. Everything made him feel as though he had arrived in a complete world. He took a deep breath, and the rolling primordial chi gathered from all directions and directly poured into his body. It was instantly converted into his power, making him feel a sense of fullness from the bottom of his heart. It turns out that it has such an auxiliary function for cultivation. It seems that this magic treasure was not refined for battle. Luo Fan's mind flickered with thoughts. The surrounding primordial chi was very rich. Although it had not condensed into liquid mist, it was more than 100 times richer than the primordial chi of heaven and earth in the outside world. Obviously, this magic treasure had the function of condensing the primordial chi of the outside world and returning the primordial chi of heaven and earth to primordial chi. This function was obviously to help with cultivation. Otherwise, it would not have been like this. As this thought flashed through his mind, Luo Fan felt much more relaxed. Although he did not think that this magic treasure could instantly rise to the 8th level and use all its power to crush him, this magic treasure had the potential to reach the 8th level. It was only because it was sealed and suppressed that it remained at the 7th level. That irresistible power hung high above him. Even if it was Luo Fan, he couldn't ignore the feeling of being threatened. Naturally, he would feel a strong pressure. At this moment, knowing that this magic treasure was not a magic treasure for attack, Luo Fan naturally felt a lot more relaxed. He raised his hand and grabbed at the void. Infinite power burst out, acting on the void. In an instant, the void slightly distorted, and the scene in front of him changed slightly. Only after long while did he regain his composure. It's just similar to the strength of the vast thousand world. After doing this, Luo Fan had already come to a conclusion. He did not use his full strength when he attacked just now. In fact, it was just a casual grab. If the level of this world exceeded that of the vast thousand world, then his grab would not have caused any changes in the void. At most, it would have torn open an area of primordial chi of the surrounding primordial chi. But if the level of this world did not reach the level of the vast thousand world, then this grab would definitely shatter the void, turning the void within a radius of dozens or hundreds of miles into powder. The reason why he used this method to test the level of this world, and not like when he stepped into the immemorial Tao realm before, where he could sense the level of the world with a slight sense, was because this world was completely different from the immemorial Tao realm outside. The structure of time and space in this world was completely different from the outside world, the eternal forest, the great Tianyuan world, and the untainted land. The structure of time and space in this world. It was an extremely strange flat structure. This kind of flat structure caused everything in the world to be flat, as if everything existed on a flat surface. Even this mountain, which was hundreds of thousands of feet high, was in fact a flat existence. Even Luo Fan himself had become a flat existence when he stepped into this world. The reason why it could not be seen with the naked eye, as if everything was no different from the normal world, was because of the perception of the naked eye and the perception of the mind. Everything had been distorted and became equally flat, which was why there seemed to be no difference. This was the first time Luo Fan had seen such a world, so he naturally could not easily measure the level of this world. Because of this, that was why he needed to use such a crude method to measure the level of this world. I didn't expect a stage 7 immortal realm cultivator to enter the world of heritage. It seems that the legacy of the sect has really weakened. At this moment, a leisurely sigh suddenly sounded in Luo Fan's ear. Luo Fan furrowed his brows. This sound came from all directions, as if it was coming from the heavens and earth. Are you the master of this world? I wonder if you could show yourself? After frowning, he relaxed and said with cupped hands. As he spoke, a figure slowly condensed in front of him. This figure had the appearance of a middle-aged man. He wore a strange robe and had a tall crown on his head. He looked extremely graceful and luxurious. Although his expression was dim, there was an indescribable majesty emanating from him. It has been over 300,000 years since a sect's disciple has come to accept the inheritance. Which sect are you from? Which generation are you? The middle-aged man asked Luo Fan. As soon as the man appeared, Luo Fan felt like he had become one with the world. Every breath he took guided the energy cycle of the world, and every movement he made guided the endless laws and laws of the world. It was as if with just a single thought, he would be able to launch a destructive attack on any existence in the world, completely wiping out all existences that entered this place. However, the man's cultivation was only at the 7th stage. He was not even in the upper 3 stages, only at the 4th stage. Luo Fan was not too afraid of a cultivator like this. This world was merely a world created by a 7th stage magic treasure. Even if all the power was gathered, it could only unleash the power of a 7th stage magic treasure. This man was only at the 7th stage of the immortal realm. Even if he was in the middle 3 stages, it was not enough to make him feel fear. With a rank 7 magic treasure and a rank 4 stage 7 immortal realm cultivation realm, it might be difficult for Luo Fan to win against such a combination, but it would not be difficult for him to leave. Naturally, he would not be afraid. Friend, you have misunderstood. I'm not a disciple of any sect. It was only a coincidence that I came here, Luo Fan said with cupped hands. The middle-aged man frowned. He did not expect Luo Fan to answer like that. As his expression changed, a wave of pressure radiated from his body. The surrounding space was slightly distorted under this pressure. Dark clouds began to gather in the sky. It was as if they were brewing an endless attack that was about to descend. Impossible. This land of inheritance is within the core of the 3 Mystery Sect. Unless you're a disciple of the 3 Mystery Sect, it is impossible for you to enter this place. Which sect are you from? Are you a disciple of the Extermination Tao sect? How dare you not recognize your sect? The middle-aged man's eyes burned with passion. The pressure he radiated increased tenfold as it pressed down on Luo Fan. This pressure was enough to make ordinary seventh-stage immortals feel uncomfortable. However, to Luo Fan, who had the will of a body, it was nothing at all. However, this was nothing. It did not give him any negative feelings at all. However, while he did not feel any negative emotions, it did not mean that he did not care, even if it did not affect him. However, there was no doubt that the other party wanted to suppress him and make him yield. He did not provoke the other party, yet the other party wanted to suppress him so rudely. No matter how firm Luo Fan's Dao heart was, he would definitely feel something. He felt displeased, but he did not reply. His body shook and a powerful aura radiated from his body, crushing down on the middle-aged man. The expression of the middle-aged man changed. He condensed all the pressure he emitted to block Luo Fan's aura. However, although Luo Fan didn't use his full strength, he still pushed his aura to the level where it could crush the middle-aged man. Therefore, the pressure released by the middle-aged man was instantly shattered by Luo Fan's aura. It didn't have the slightest ability to stop the aura as it scattered in all directions, allowing the aura to continue to crush him without any hindrance. The middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. He did something, but his body suddenly became illusory. It was as if he had teleported. It was as if he was hiding in another space and time. Luo Fan's imposing aura suddenly fell, but it didn't fall on anything. It was as if the place where the middle-aged man stood was empty, without any physical existence. Luo Fan's control over his own imposing manner had already reached the acme of perfection. Although his aura had landed on nothing, it would not cause him any harm like an ordinary living being who used their power wrongly. He only revealed a faint smile on his face and withdrew his aura. Then, he withdrew his aura back into his body and stood there quietly, as if nothing had happened. When the middle-aged man saw this, his face alternated between green and white. It took a long time for him to return to normal. The changes in the space and the dark clouds in the sky also returned to normal. The space returned to normal, and the dark clouds disappeared. It was as if nothing had happened. The middle-aged man reappeared and bowed to Luo Fan. I was worried about the sect just now, so I overreacted. I have been rude. I understand that you are worried about the sect, so I will not take it to heart. I am Luo Fan. How should I address you? Luo Fan returned the greeting. I'm the elder of the three mystery sect, Chuan Daozi, the middle-aged man said. At this moment, his mental state had returned to normal. Every move he made was graceful and noble, giving off an intimidating charm that would make anyone have a good impression of him. After the two of them exchanged greetings, they did not immediately ask each other what they were concerned about. Instead, Chuan Daozi invited Luo Fan to his cave dwelling as a guest. Luo Fan was naturally overjoyed and agreed. Chuan Daozi had a very special status in this inheritance treasure. If he wanted to obtain the inheritance, he would have to go through Chuan Daozi, so he naturally had many things to ask him. Chuan Daozi had clearly been in this treasure for countless years, so he did not know what was happening in the outside world. Naturally, he had many things to ask Luo Fan. In a situation like this where they had many questions to ask each other, they naturally needed a place to communicate. It was impossible for them to communicate directly on the mountain peak against the cold wind. Although the changes in the surrounding environment were nothing to them since they were both in the seventh stage immortal realm, it was impossible for them to do so. However, talking in a bad environment was naturally not as good as talking in a good environment. Chuan Daozi's cave dwelling was hidden in the depths of the Sea of Clouds. According to the structure of this world, it was located in the depths of the treasure, in a place that could not be seen from a mirror. The two of them flew up together. Along the way, Chuan Daozi introduced the various things of this world to Luo Fan. The structure of this world was actually quite similar to the Great Heaven Origin world, but it was countless times smaller. There were hundreds of continents in this world. The dozens of continents in the center were named the inner domain, while the hundreds of continents outside were named the outer domain. The nature of this world was exactly the same as the great heaven origin world's inner domain and outer domain. This world was at the level of a major thousand world. Just like the great chaos world, it could also give birth to fourth, sixth-stage cultivators. However, because this was only a world inside the treasure, the resources were limited. As a result, over the countless years, only a few dozen sixth-stage cultivators had existed. The status of sixth-stage cultivators in this world was similar to that of sages in the great heaven origin world. They were high above and controlled everything. As a result, each of the dozens of continents was controlled and suppressed by a sixth-stage immortal. It was also because of their suppression that the inner domain was more peaceful. As for the outer domain, it was similar to the great heaven origin world and the eternal forest. There were no sixth-stage immortals, but every cultivator was working hard to reach the sixth stage. As a result, it was extremely chaotic. It was also a cruel world where the strong preyed on the weak. As he listened to Chuan Daozi's explanation, Luo Fan's understanding of this world became deeper and deeper. He gradually felt an indescribable feeling. To be continued. Chapter 798. This world seemed to have a similar function to the eternal forest. It could simulate the state of the great heaven primordial world, and it also seemed to have the function of using this method to comprehend the feeling of a saint. Book Reading Network. As soon as this feeling appeared, Luo Fan had a hunch that the current state of the world within a magic treasure might have been arranged by Chuan Daozi. There was no evidence to prove this hunch, but Luo Fan could believe it. He knew that there was a high possibility that this was the truth. However, this did not mean anything to him. Thus, he did not say it out loud. He just nodded with a smile and followed Chuan Daozi up the sea of clouds. During this process, Luo Fan could faintly feel that the surrounding space-time was constantly changing. The surrounding laws were also undergoing subtle changes. The 83-73 mysterious way transformation. This change could not be described with words, but it gradually separated the surrounding space-time from the surroundings. The two of them were advancing extremely quickly. However, it took them 2 hours to travel from where Luo Fan was to where Chuan Daozi's cave abode was. This period of time didn't seem like much, but under normal circumstances, it was more than enough for 2 seven-stage immortals to travel a distance of 1 billion kilometers. This showed how difficult it was to get to Chuan Daozi's cave abode from that location. Of course, Luo Fan did not have any doubts about this. After all, there were dozens of sixth-stage immortals controlling the world. If it was so easy to reach Chuan Daozi's cave abode, wouldn't it be easily discovered by sixth-stage immortals? How could they hide behind the scenes and control this part of the world? When the surrounding space-time stabilized, Luo Fan suddenly felt like he had reappeared in the chaotic Dao realm. Apart from the natural yuan qi that filled the surroundings, all the laws were not much different from the outside world. It was so much so that the surroundings were gray and hazy. Only a single mountain could be seen in this space. It was the 8,373rd profound Dao. The mountain shone brightly and naturally emitted an aura that could suppress everything. Any living being that saw this mountain would instantly know how mysterious it was. On top of the mountain, there were countless densely packed buildings. These buildings were of all shapes and sizes. Some were tall, some were short, some were wide, and some were narrow. They naturally emitted waves of Taoist rhymes, and there was a kind of endless mysterious charm within them. When Luo Fan saw this mountain peak, he immediately understood that the many buildings on this mountain peak likely stored the many ancient books passed down by the 3 mysterious paths. For a moment, a look of anticipation appeared on his face. The Chuan Dao disciple was paying attention to Luo Fan. When he saw the change in Luo Fan's expression, he couldn't help but laugh. He smiled and said, "This mountain is my cave abode, and it's also the place where my 3 mysterious paths inheritance is stored. I made a fool of myself in front of fellow Taoists." Luo Fan shook his head and praised, "Just from this aura, I can tell that the Three Mysterious sect is definitely an extremely powerful sect. As they spoke, they arrived at a manor at the foot of the mountain. The manor wasn't big, but it was enough to accommodate hundreds of people. The interior wasn't luxurious. However, it was filled with natural interest, as if it had fused with nature. Thank you for your praise, fellow Taoist. The Chuan Dao disciple thanked Luo Fan for praising the strength of the Three Mysterious Path and led Luo Fan into the manor. The innate Yuan Qi within the manor was more than 100 times denser than the outside world. It had already condensed into a faint mist that circulated throughout the manor. Fellow Taoist, why didn't you find some servants to serve you? Luo Fan was surprised when he saw that the interior of the manor was extremely empty. I don't like having too many people. Since I don't have any needs, I didn't find anyone to come here. Fellow Taoist, please excuse me. The Chuan Dao disciple smiled and said, Fellow Taoist is noble. I can't compare to you. Luo Fan praised. After sitting down in a guest building in the manor, the Chuan Dao disciple got to the point and said, Fellow Taoist is the first expert to come here in 300,000 years. I wonder if you can explain the situation outside. How can fellow Taoist enter this place without being a disciple of the Three Mysterious Path? Luo Fan was already prepared. He knew that the Chuan Dao disciple would definitely ask this question. Thus, he wasn't surprised and directly told him about the primordial ruins, specifically explaining the situation outside the primordial Dao realm. As for the truth, Luo Fan didn't hide anything. After all, it wasn't much, and it didn't involve many of his secrets. The Chuan Dao disciple listened to Luo Fan's words. He was stunned for a moment, as if he had been struck by lightning. His face was filled with disbelief. How was this possible? Why would the inherited Dao realm leave the sect and appear in this so-called ruins? Could it be that the Three Mysterious Path has already been destroyed? No, impossible. The Three Mysterious Path has at least 10 Dao Masters, 100 Transcendent Masters, and 1,000 Dao Integration Masters. Apart from the sages, there are no more than 100 sects in the world that can resist them. It's impossible for them to be destroyed in just 300,000 years. The Chuan Dao disciple murmured. In the end, he opened his eyes wide and shouted angrily. 300,000 years ago, there were disciples of the Three Mysterious Path who came to the land of inheritance to accept the inheritance. At that time, they heard from the disciples that the Three Mysterious Path was still prosperous and was still a first-class force in the world. This naturally meant that if the Three Mysterious Path had been destroyed, it must have been in the past 300,000 years. That was why the Chuan Dao disciple made such a judgment. When Luo Fan heard the Chuan Dao disciple's words, he couldn't help but be secretly shocked. The Three Mysterious Path had 10 Dao Masters, 100 Transcendent Masters, and 1,000 Dao Integration Masters. The strength of the Three Mysterious Path was simply beyond the limits of his imagination. At this moment, he already understood that in the cultivation system of the Tianyuan Great World, there were 5 realms beyond the 9 stages of the immortal realm before becoming a sage. They were Annihilation Realm, Void Enlightenment Realm, Dao Integration Realm, Transcendent Realm, and Dao Master. Although he had never heard of the honorifics of each realm, he knew from the names that the Chuan Dao disciple had mentioned that the Dao Master must be a cultivator who had reached the Dao Master realm, and the Transcendent Realm must be a cultivator who had reached the Transcendent Realm. Similarly, Dao Integration Masters could not be cultivators of other realms besides the Dao Integration Realm. Based on his conjecture about these 5 realms, even if he cultivated his body to the peak of the Zenith Heaven Golden Path, he would at most be equivalent to a Dao Integration Master at the Dao Integration Realm. This was the result he boldly inferred from the fact that when he was at the peak of the Zenith Heaven Golden Path, he was equivalent to a cultivator who had surpassed the 9 stages of the immortal realm. If he made a conservative deduction, he might even be equivalent to a Void Enlightenment Realm cultivator. Under such circumstances, the Three Mysterious Path had 1,000 Dao Integration Masters, 100 Transcendent Realm cultivators, and 10 Dao Masters. This was the strength of the Three Mysterious Path. It was easy to imagine. Luo Fan boldly deduced that even if the number of Void Enlightenment Realm cultivators did not reach 10,000, it would not be too far off. As for the number of invaders, it would probably reach about 100,000. There would definitely be more stage 9 Immortal Realm cultivators. From the looks of it, there were at least 10 million existences in the three mysterious path that could surpass Luo Fan's clone. Even if it was stronger than the body in the primordial world, there were at least 100,000 cultivators. How could Luo Fan not be shocked by the strength of the three mysterious path? From what Daoist Chuan had said, he knew that there were at least 100 sects in this world that could compare to the three mysterious path. There were at least 100 of them. This meant that in the Tianyuan Great World, other than the saints, there were at least 100 million people who could surpass Luo Fan's body in the primordial world. If the 800 saints who were even more powerful were added, the number of living beings that were stronger than Luo Fan's body would probably reach billions. There were already so many people who were stronger than his body, and they were even stronger than the clone that was here. That number was more than 1,000 times greater. If that was the case, with the current strength of Luo Fan's clone, it might be an exaggeration to say that it was at the level of an ant. However, he definitely could not be considered an expert. After understanding this, Luo Fan instantly became extremely vigilant. His desire to increase his strength was more than 10,000 times stronger than before. Luo Fan had made up his mind. However, the Daoist Chuan seemed to have suffered an unimaginable blow, and his expression was extremely panicked. He muttered words of disbelief and unimaginable. After a long time, he finally recovered from the unbearable blow. Although there was still a bit of panic on his face, he managed to maintain his composure. Thank you for telling me about the situation of the three mysterious path. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid I would have been kept in the dark for many years before I could understand. The Daoist Chuan sighed. The three mysterious path is so powerful. I don't think it will be destroyed. Fellow Daoist, you don't have to worry too much. Luo Fan could only say this. The Daoist Chuan shook his head and said, Fellow Daoist, you might not know the significance of this inheritance ground to the three mysterious path. The inherited Dao realm definitely wouldn't leave the three mysterious sects mountain. Since the inherited Dao realm had somehow come to the primordial ruins, something must have happened to the three mysterious sect. Even their inheritance might have been severed. I should have thought of this long ago. With the power of the three mysterious path, no matter how few geniuses there will only be geniuses coming here every few thousand years to accept the inheritance. Now that no disciple has come to accept the inheritance for 300,000 years, something must have happened. I just didn't want to believe it. When Luo Fan heard the Daoist Chuan's words, he didn't know what to say. The Daoist Chuan was only talking to Luo Fan. He didn't intend to listen to any construction ideas from Luo Fan's mouth. Therefore, he kept on talking. My three mysterious path was created by three Dao sovereigns 37 trillion years ago. Back then, the three patriarchs discovered this Dao inheritance realm by chance and obtained the inheritance of the three Dao sovereigns from tens of trillions of years ago. As a result, they jointly created the three mysterious path. This primordial Dao realm is also regarded as the sect's Dao inheritance realm. Once there are talented disciples in the sect, they will be allowed to come to the Dao inheritance realm to try their luck in order to continue the inheritance that might be interrupted. The Daoist Chuan told Luo Fan about the long history of the three mysterious path. As Luo Fan listened to this history, most of the doubts in his heart were finally solved. The three mysterious path was developed from the inheritance left behind by the three Dao sovereigns who had gone to the Saint realm with the five-element Dao sovereigns. No wonder this Dao realm was regarded as the sect's inheritance ground. Understanding this, he felt a strong sense of admiration for the three Dao sovereigns who had created the three mysterious path. Once other cultivators received the inheritance, they would at most take away all the treasures. However, the three of them were astonishingly bold. Instead of moving the inheritance magic treasures, they directly took the entire Dao realm as their own. Not only did they occupy the inheritance that the three of them had obtained, they even treated the other inheritances in the Tao realm as their own and used them for their own use. But I do have a question. I don't know if I should ask. Although he had explained many of his doubts, Luo Fan still had some unresolved doubts, so he asked. The Taoist Chuan had a strong desire to talk, so he naturally wouldn't refuse to answer Luo Fan's question. Thus he said, "Fellow Taoist, feel free to ask. I once obtained an inheritance left behind by the five-element Tao sovereign 2,000 years ago. Why isn't there an inheritance elder like you there?" Luo Fan asked. So fellow Taoist actually obtained the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign. What a good opportunity, what a good fortune. When the Taoist Chuan heard this, he was filled with deep respect, and an extremely envious expression appeared on his face. Look at his expression. Luo Fan thought to himself, sure enough, the three mysterious paths had occupied the primordial Tao realm for 37 trillion years. Even if it was a random probe, every magic treasure and inheritance in the primordial Tao realm would definitely be discovered by them. The inheritance left behind by the five-element Tao sovereign was no exception. However, in this way, why would the projection left behind by the five-element Tao sovereign say that he hadn't seen any other living beings for tens of trillions of years? Could it be that the three mysterious paths had countless genius disciples in the past 37 trillion years, but none of them were interested in the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign? Or was it that the three mysterious paths specifically forbade them from seizing the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign? It's just a coincidence. Even though he thought this way, he still replied, "Fellow Taoist, you may not know this, but the three mysterious paths has been established for 37 trillion years. There are at least 100 billion genius disciples who have entered the primordial Tao realm, and more than half of them have tried to accept the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign. However, no matter how talented the genius disciples were, none of them were able to obtain the recognition of the magic treasure. None of them were able to see the true inheritance. No matter how powerful the disciples were, none of them were able to obtain the recognition of the magic treasure. None of them were able to see the true inheritance. Even the Tao sovereign of the five-element Tao sovereign had turned the inheritance treasure inside out countless times. He had even studied every detail of it in detail to the point where he could directly copy the magic treasure perfectly. However, he still couldn't find any traces of the existence of the inheritance within it. It was as if it was an ordinary magic treasure with no inheritance within it at all. If it weren't for the fact that almost all of the other 18 inheritances contained the powerful inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign, this magic treasure might have already been dismantled thousands of times. Fellow Taoist, to be able to obtain the inheritance, your luck is truly enviable. The Taoist Chuan looked at Luo Fan with a strange expression. Tao Chuan said. When Luo Fan heard this, he couldn't help but feel puzzled. The inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign was not difficult to obtain, not to mention bypassing all the tests and directly going to the body of the magic treasure to see the projection of the five-element Tao sovereign and accept the inheritance. Just the rulers of the major forces like the Bloodwood King would pass the test in a few years. They accepted the inheritance. How come none of the billions of genius disciples of the three mysterious paths were able to accept the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign? Luo Fan thought this, but he naturally wouldn't say it out loud. He only said, "It was indeed luck. It seems that I must have met the requirements of the inheritance in some way, which is why I was able to obtain the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign." The Taoist Chuan said, "Fellow Taoist, your luck is truly amazing." What the inheritance of the five-element Tao sovereign looked like back then, and whether it even existed or not has become a mystery in the sect. Today, fellow Taoist has finally solved this mystery. Unfortunately, the sect has already. As the Taoist Chuan spoke, he thought of the current situation of the three mysterious paths and could not help but sigh. However, he was a rank 7 celestial realm being after all, so he had a strong ability to adjust his emotions. He quickly extricated himself from his emotions, and his expression returned to normal. He said, "We legacy elders are disciples specially trained by the sect to manage the legacy. We did not obtain the legacy of Tao Master 5 Elements, so naturally there are no legacy elders among us." He thought of the question Luo Fan had asked before and directly answered Luo Fan. Luo Fan had already expected this kind of answer, so he said, "So that's how it is. In that case, the many inheritances here are all the inheritances of this magic treasure. I just don't know which Tao Master's inheritance belongs to. The inheritance here belongs to Tao Master Aurora Polaris, as well as the inheritance obtained by the sect's ancestor Chuan Guang," Daoist Chuan said. As he spoke, Daoist Chuan seemed to think of something and hesitated slightly. After a while, he said, "I have something to trouble you with, but I don't know if it's too presumptuous or if the other inheritance elders will agree to it. Could you please wait here for a while? Or perhaps look through some of the inheritances that can be passed on to outsiders while I discuss it with the other inheritance elders." "Please go ahead," Daoist Chuan said. Luo Fan couldn't figure out what Chuan Daozi was thinking at the moment, so he was a little curious. Chuan Daozi apologized for his rudeness and opened a door. Behind that door were countless ancient books engraved with jade and other similar materials, allowing Luo Fan to read them at will. As for himself, he hurriedly left the guest area and went to another part of the manor to busy himself with something. Luo Fan shook his head and got up, entering the door that had suddenly appeared. As soon as he entered, he felt waves of ancient aura assaulting his senses. That aura did not come from anywhere else, but from the books on the bookshelves in front of him. It was clear that although these books were inheritances that could be passed on to outsiders, they were still extremely ancient and precious. To be continued. Chapter 799. Luo Fan could vaguely guess what Chuan Daozi had gone to do, so he wasn't in a hurry. He leisurely flipped through the countless books in the room. First published, these books were collected by the three mysterious Tao over the past 37 trillion years through various methods. Some of them were unrelated to the three mysterious Tao root. It was all-encompassing and involved many aspects that were unimaginably complex. Although it could not be said that it contained all the knowledge of the great heaven primordial world, but at least all aspects were involved. Of course, cultivation methods and divine arts were also a major category that couldn't be missed. Although these cultivation methods were not the fundamental cultivation methods of the three mysterious Tao, they were still the result of billions of years of accumulation and selection. Every single one of them was extremely profound, and every single one of them was extremely rare to find in the current Tianyuan world, which was the 838th inheritance. Among them, Luo Fan even saw many cultivation techniques that could allow cultivators to reach the top 3 grades. Of course, cultivation techniques that could allow cultivators to reach the upper 3 grades were naturally quite rare. Moreover, even these rare upper 3 grades cultivation techniques were usually incomplete or had fatal weaknesses or side effects. This kind of cultivation method was naturally not very meaningful to those who wanted to directly cultivate these methods to attain peerless abilities and transcend. It would only make them hesitant. However, for someone like Luo Fan, who wanted to create a cultivation method that was most suitable for him through reading books, it was the best choice. As a result, during the time that Chuan Daozi had left, Luo Fan had really put down everything and focused on reading through the numerous books, incorporating everything recorded in those books into his own memories. Chuan Daozi left for a full 2 hours. 2 hours later, when he returned with a heavy expression, he only saw Luo Fan standing in an ancient book vault that he had opened before with a face full of joy. Luo Fan's eyes were shining brightly, as if there were endless words and patterns constantly swimming in them. 838 continued succession with this. He could not help but be slightly stunned. The reason why he had opened the library for Luo Fan to read was because he was about to leave. He was afraid that it would be too rude, so he gave Luo Fan something to kill time. However, he did not expect that Luo Fan would really read the book seriously. It looked like he'd gain a lot, so how could he not be surprised? These books are just ordinary books. Almost everything recorded in them can be found in the outside world. Why does fellow Taoist Luo Fan attach so much importance to them? Chuan Daozi thought to himself. However, he didn't think too much about it. He just thought that Luo Fan was thirsty for knowledge. At this moment, Luo Fan looked as if he was a disciple of the Tao. He was overjoyed, because during these 2 hours, he'd already memorized all the books in the library. Moreover, he noticed a few cultivation techniques amongst them that provided him with rather great enlightenment, allowing him to faintly grasp the path to create his own cultivation technique. This was already a huge gain for him, so it was naturally enough to make him happy. Chuan Daoist did not hide his arrival. As such, the moment he returned, Luo Fan had already discovered him. He stopped flipping through the books and turned around, saying, "Thank you for your help, fellow Taoist. There are a lot of books here. But it's an eye-opener for me." Although Chuan Daoist was solemn, he did not act impolitely. He smiled and said, "The books here are just some ordinary books from the Three Mysterious Path. Since they're useful to you, it's my honor. How can I help you?" As he spoke, Luo Fan had already left the library and returned to the guest room. He sat down with Chuan Daoist. After sitting down, Chuan Daoist said, "Just now I used a secret technique to contact the other 17 inheritance elders. I told them about the changes outside the inheritance realm and discussed my plan with them. In the end, most of them didn't quite agree with my plan. Only 4 of them reluctantly agreed to my idea because of our friendship." As he spoke, he revealed a disappointed look. Luo Fan nodded to show that he understood. He knew that this must have something to do with what Chuan Daoist wanted him to do. He did not beat around the bush and said directly, "Fellow Taoist, you said that you have something to do. What is it?" Chuan Daoist looked a little gloomy. He stood up and bowed deeply to Luo Fan, saying, "I beg you, fellow Taoist, to accept the inheritance of the Three Mysterious Path and pass it down from the Tao realm. When the disciples of the Three Mysterious Path become Tao Masters, they can come here to take the chaotic Tao realm and rebuild the Three Mysterious Path." Luo Fan heard Chuan Daoist's words and thought. As expected, he had guessed this before Chuan Daoist left, but when it really happened, he was still a little surprised and found it hard to imagine. "I've only known you for less than a day. Do you trust me so much?" Luo Fan sighed. "Sometimes, it doesn't take too long to understand a person. Although I've only known you for a short time, I can see that you are broad-minded and ambitious. Entrusting this matter to you is the best way to do it." Chuan Daoist said. When Luo Fan heard this, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. This reason was just for show. Although sometimes it didn't take too long to understand a person, it took a long time to confirm what kind of person a person was. Otherwise, there would be no such thing as a long time to see a person's heart. Chuan Daoist's words sounded good, but he was afraid that it was not the reason. The reason why Chuan Daoist entrusted the inheritance of the Three Mysterious Path to him was because he had no other choice. The Three Mysterious Path had disappeared for 300,000 years, and only Luo Fan, a stage 7 immortal realm existence, had come here to accept the inheritance. Who knew how many tens of thousands of years it would take for another creature to come here? Obviously, the faster the Three Mysterious Paths inheritance was inherited, the higher the chance of finding out the truth about the Three Mysterious Paths' disappearance. Therefore, Chuan Daoist could only entrust the Three Mysterious Paths inheritance to Luo Fan. In fact, Luo Fan could even guess that there were at least 18 inheritances in the Three Mysterious Path, which corresponded to the 18 inheritance treasures of the 5 elements Tao Sovereign. Of the 5 that were given to him, it shouldn't include the most fundamental, powerful, and important inheritance of the Three Mysterious Path. Although he had guessed this, Luo Fan naturally wouldn't expose it. In any case, his current plan was to obtain the inheritance. Through comparing the various inheritances, he would create the most suitable cultivation method for himself so that his cultivation could catch up to or even surpass his body. No matter what Chuan Daoist was planning, he definitely had an inheritance for him. Since that was the case, how would the other party's considerations affect the outcome? Thus, Luo Fan only smiled and said, "Since you say so, then I naturally won't decline. I will naturally not decline. I will definitely pass down the three mysterious Tao. Thank you, fellow Taoist. Chuan Taoist was overjoyed and bowed again. Luo Fan hurriedly helped Chuan Taoist up, but he said that he didn't dare to accept such a big bow. Chuan Taoist was very anxious at this moment and didn't have the mood to continue being polite with Luo Fan. He directly left the guest room with Luo Fan and turned to the back of the manor. Here, there was a path that led straight to the top of the mountain. This path twisted and turned, and it seemed to connect the countless buildings on the mountain together. Luo Fan looked at this path. With just a glance, he knew that this path was a path of trials. With every step forward, his mind and state of mind would be under greater pressure. If one were to reach the peak, the pressure on one's mental state would probably cause a 7th-stage immortal realm cultivator's mind to collapse and his will to perish. This was also the strongest power of this inherited magic treasure. Looking at this path, Luo Fan knew that the building at the top of the mountain was most likely the most fundamental inheritance of Tao Master Aurora Polaris. Chuan Taoist led Luo Fan here. Naturally, he couldn't let Luo Fan take this test. After all, Luo Fan wasn't a disciple of the three mysterious path. He had obtained the inheritance because Chuan Taoist had begged him to. How could he accept the test and obtain the inheritance like a disciple of the three mysterious path? Chuan Taoist came here and knelt towards a mountain. He kowtowed 9 times and prayed. Today, disciple has heard that the sect's inheritance has been broken. Disciple boldly took out the inheritance and handed it to fellow Taoist outside to receive it. Ancestors, please forgive disciple for violating the rules. Disciple is willing to face the wall for 1 billion years. Ancestors, please bear witness. As he spoke, he kowtowed 9 more times. Seeing this, Luo Fan realized that only 4 of the 18 inheritance elders were willing to make this decision with Chuan Taoist. Facing the wall for 1 billion years was not something an ordinary being could do. Even a rank 7 immortal realm cultivator would not be able to face such a fate. They probably wouldn't be happy to accept it. However, he didn't say anything else. What punishment and what price he would have to pay was up to Chuan Taoist himself, and it was his responsibility. Even Luo Fan, who had accepted the task, was in no position to persuade him. Thus, he could only pretend that he didn't know anything. After kowtowing, Chuan Taoist stood up with a resolute expression. He raised his hand and grabbed at the void. The void instantly distorted, and the entire mountain seemed to shake violently. It was as if the entire mountain had suddenly become a living thing. At the same time, the enchanted treasure, the world within it, everything within it, and all living beings began to tremble violently. It was as if the enchanted treasure had experienced a devastating shock. Fortunately, the shock disappeared as quickly as it came. In the blink of an eye, everything calmed down as if nothing had happened. Only a door appeared in front of Luo Fan. There was a strange light inside the door. This light was mysterious and unimaginably beautiful. Anyone who saw would be stunned. It was Aurora Borealis. In an instant, Luo Fan knew what the light in front of him was. Seeing this light, Luo Fan took a deep breath. Just from this light, he knew how profound Tao Master Aurora Borealis's cultivation was. Although it was just a patch of light, it contained boundless vitality. One could even vaguely sense that there seemed to be billions of worlds within it. An indescribable aura of control seeped out from it, making the surrounding space seem to submit to the existence of the light. Chuan Taoist said, "Inside is all of Tao Master Aurora Borealis inheritance. Fellow cultivator can directly enter and obtain it." Luo Fan couldn't wait any longer. After sensing it for a bit, he knew that this light was formed naturally from endless information. It didn't contain any power, so he bowed towards Chuan Taoist before turning around and stepping into the door. After Luo Fan stepped into the light, the door slowly shrank and turned into a fist-sized ball of light. It floated in the air, but it naturally gave off an extremely stable aura. It was as if it had existed since the beginning of time and would continue to exist forever. At this moment, the void distorted slightly, and 4 doors appeared around Chuan Daoist. These doors were all different. One was pitch black, but it gave off an aura of calmness, nurturing, and peace. One was blazing white. It gave off an aura of endless holiness. One was gray, but it gave off an aura of time and light. The remaining one was transparent, like nothingness, and only an aura of power was brewing within it. These 4 doors, along with the one that Chuan Daoist had opened earlier, they were the inheritances of 5 of the 18 sects of the 3 Xian Dao. Among them, the pitch-black door was from Dao Master Darkness, the blazing white door was from Dao Master Light, the gray door was from the current Dao Master, and the last one was from Dao Master Strength. The inheritances of the 4 Dao Masters and Dao Master Aurora Borealis weren't the weakest in the 3 Xian Dao. However, they weren't the strongest either. They were in the middle stages. Every Dao Master's inheritance was extremely powerful, and it was enough to guide any cultivator from an ordinary being to a Dao Master. It was just as Luo Fan had expected. These 5 inheritances were indeed extremely important to the 3 Xian Dao. However, this wasn't the most important. Even if it was spread out, it would at most cause some losses, but it wouldn't shake the foundation of the 3 Xian Dao. As the 4 doors appeared, light figures gradually distorted and changed beside each door. In the end, they formed the appearances of 4 middle-aged men. The 4 middle-aged men all had different appearances, and their auras were also quite different. To be more specific, they had many similarities to the doors beside them. However, it didn't matter how the 4 of them looked. Regardless of how their auras were, their cultivation level was only at the 7th step of the immortal realm. Moreover, they were only at the 4th stage of the immortal realm. In other places, they might be considered extremely impressive, but in the context of the 3 Xian Dao, they were rather shabby. Fellow junior brothers, we have been cultivating a special inheritance method since birth, and our cultivation has been limited to the level of the inheritance treasure. In the future, it is impossible for us to transcend. Therefore, the inheritance of the sect is our only responsibility, our only work, and the only thing we can do for the sect. This time, you have not let down your sect by agreeing to my decision. I thank you all here. When Chuan Daozi saw the shadows of the men, he solemnly bowed. The men bowed in return and said in unison, "For the sect's inheritance, we will not hesitate to die 10,000 times." Putting aside how determined Chuan Daozi and the others were after Luo Fan entered, Luo Fan felt as if his entire body had completely melted the moment he stepped into the aurora. In an instant, his body became invisible and his mind expanded infinitely. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded to a point where even he could not perceive its boundaries. In the process of his mind expanding to infinite levels, endless information suddenly poured into his mind from all directions. The information was all-encompassing, from breathing to comprehending the laws of laws, to how to become a Dao Master, how to become a sage, and everything else. Moreover, the information was not messy. Instead, it was in an extremely strict order. Which techniques came first, which techniques came last, which techniques were related to these techniques, and which techniques complemented each other. There was not a trace of chaos in all of this. Even if it was a creature without any cultivation foundation, as long as it received the information in order, it would not be difficult for it to understand. Of course, if it was a creature without any cultivation foundation, it would only take a moment for the huge amount of information to burst his mind and his consciousness to completely collapse. After all, the amount of information was so huge that it had reached a shocking level. Even with Luo Fan's ability to accept, he felt a swelling pain in his head at this moment. His mind showed signs of being unable to accept it. So this is the inheritance of Dao Master Aurora Polaris. It seems that it is no less than the inheritance of Dao Master 5 Element. Luo Fan could only sigh with emotion at this time. Dao Master Aurora Polaris cultivated the Aurora Magnetism Dao. The Aurora Magnetism Dao was an extremely mysterious existence. In Tao Master Aurora Polaris's view of the world, everything in the universe came from the Aurora Magnetism Tao. It was because of the Aurora Magnetism Tao that the boundless, vast, and high Tianyuan universe was created. This view of the world was completely different from that of Tao Master 5 Element and even from that of Luo Fan. However, as a view of the world created by a Tao Master, this view of the world could naturally be self-justifying and even extremely perfect. There was no trace of omission at all. Using this view of the world, it could even explain many things that Tao Master 5 Element could not explain. There was even no distinction between the heavenly laws and the heavenly laws. There was only one fundamental method, and as long as one cultivated according to it, one could reach the saint realm. From the endless information that poured into his mind, Luo Fan gradually understood Tao Master Aurora Polaris's view of the world and could not help but sigh with emotion. At the same time, he also had a little enlightenment. Perhaps a special, different view of the world is the reason why these Tao Masters can transcend all living beings and become high and mighty Tao Masters and have the qualification to set foot on the road to saint.